A sharp pain exploded in my skull. I winced, clutching my head as a soft, rhythmic voice echoed through my mind. It was an announcement. Attention passengers, we are arriving at Zhonghai City. Please prepare your belongings and get ready to disembark. I snapped awake. My hands flew up in front of my chest in a defensive stance, ready for a killing blow. But as I looked around, my heart skipped a beat. I wasn't on a battlefield. I was sitting in a cramped, noisy train car packed with people. Confusion hit me like a physical weight. My brow furrowed as I scanned the faces around me. This felt familiar. Too familiar. This was the train I took to Zhonghai for university back in 2010. How was this possible? I remembered the end. I had fought the 3 great immortal emperors of the assassin sects. I had been betrayed by that woman. We were supposed to be dead. I had sacrificed everything to take her down with me. Yet here I was, back in 2010, back on Earth. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. After a few moments of silence, a realization dawned on me. I hadn't died. I had been reborn. In my past life, I was Qin Feng. But in the cultivation world of the Hengtian Star Domain, I was known as the 9 Dusts Immortal Emperor. I had left Earth at 28 after a car accident sent me plunging into the ocean. I didn't drown. Instead, I was transported to a world of immortals. My talent was unmatched. I was taken in by the sect master of the Xiaoyao Immortal Sect and became his final disciple. With endless resources and 1,000 years of blood, sweat, and tears, I reached the tribulation stage. I became an immortal emperor. In a world where no one had truly ascended for hundreds of thousands of years, I was at the very top. I was invincible. I had fought the geniuses of every race and never lost a single battle. My name, Qin Jiuchen, made the entire cultivation world tremble. But even the strongest man can be brought down by a snake in the grass. Especially when that snake is the person you trust most. It all started with the Samsara Pearl. It was a legendary treasure I found during my travels, said to hold the secret to true immortality and eternal life. I didn't hide it from my lover, the ethereal fairy. I wanted us to unlock its secrets and ascend together. I was a fool. Under the temptation of eternal life, love became a joke to her. She didn't want to share. She wanted it all. She knew she couldn't beat me in a fair fight, so she poisoned me. To make sure I stayed down, she hired the leaders of the 3 greatest assassin organizations, God of War, Hell, and Yellow Springs. Even poisoned and outnumbered, I fought like a demon. I killed those 3 immortal emperors one by one, but I was at my limit. My soul was fading, and my life hung by a thread. That's when she struck from the shadows. Seeing her triumphant smile, I felt a rage I couldn't contain. I chose to self-detonate my nascent soul, intending to drag her into the abyss with me. Thinking of it now, my eyes burned with killing intent. I clenched my fists, but the surge of power I expected wasn't there. My world-destroying cultivation was gone. My divine sense, which could once sweep across entire planets, had vanished. Was it all a dream? I frowned. No. The memories of those 1,000 years were too vivid. The pain, the techniques, the blood, it was all real. Then, I felt something in the depths of my mind. A faint glow. It was the Samsara Pearl. A cold smile played on my lips. It wasn't a dream. I really was back. The train screeched to a halt. I grabbed my suitcase and stepped onto the platform. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust and the chatter of the crowd. I stood there for a moment, my gaze turning sharp. If the heavens gave me, Qin Jiuchen, a second chance, I wasn't going to waste it. Every debt owed to me in my past life will be paid back in full. Those who helped me will be rewarded 100-fold. Those who cross me will suffer for 3 lifetimes. 1,000 years had passed in my mind, but I hadn't forgotten my family. Mom, Dad, my sister, my brother, and little Jing. I'm back. I looked ahead with steady eyes. I came from a simple farm family. My parents worked the soil for generations, and they were so proud when I got into Zhonghai University. I was their hope. In my previous life, this was where I met the first woman I ever loved, Ouyang Jing. We had just started our relationship when we were torn apart by her family. The man behind it all was Wang Xuabin. If I remembered correctly, he was a third-year student back then. His family was the wealthiest in Zhonghai, with power in real estate, hotels, and entertainment. Even provincial leaders gave them face. Wang Xuebin didn't even see me as an opponent. To him, I was just a fly to be swatted away. He told her family about us, and with one sentence, he crushed my world. I was powerless to stop him then. But Ouyang Jing was stubborn. Even under pressure, she never gave Wang Xuebin the time of day. I remembered what she told him right before everything fell apart. Ouyang Jing told Wang Xuebin she only loved me. That confession was the spark that lit the fuse. Wang Xuebin's rage was uncontrollable, and naturally, he turned all that hatred toward me. In my past life, he made my college years a living hell. Anyone who even tried to get close to me received a warning from him. I became a pariah. I was the campus plague, and people stayed as far away from me as possible. It didn't stop at graduation. Every time I applied for a job, I hit a brick wall. Wang Xuebin's shadow followed me everywhere. But the worst part was what he did to my parents. They had spent their entire lives saving up to open a small department store. Suddenly, for reasons no one could explain, the business collapsed. Watching their life's work vanish into thin air broke them. They both fell deathly ill. In my previous life, Wang Xuebin actually boasted about it to my face. He told me everything, detail by detail. He wanted me to regret ever being born. He wanted me to suffer for crossing him. Because of him, I was 28 and had nothing. No career, no love, no future. Then came the car accident. If I hadn't been lucky enough to transcend into the cultivation world at the moment of my death, I would have ended up at the bottom of the ocean. 1,000 years of cultivation changes a man. I see things clearly now. That car accident wasn't an accident at all. Thinking about it made my eyes turn cold. Wang Xuebin, the Wang family, I, Qin Jiuchen, have returned. This time, I will pay you back 100-fold. I'll make you regret everything, even after you've gone to hell. My first 20 years were spent in poverty and humiliation. The next 1,000 years, I was an invincible force, yet I was betrayed by the one I loved most. Now, by some twist of fate, I was back with all my memories. I would follow my heart this time. No one would control me again. As I stepped out of the train station, my phone buzzed. The screen read, "Mom." My fingers trembled as I pressed answer. A voice I hadn't heard in a millennium spoke. "Xiaofeng, have you reached the school yet?" The warmth hit me instantly. My nose felt a bit stingy. "Mom, I'm off the train. I'll be at the school soon." "Xiaofeng, we don't have much money, and we couldn't go with you to see you off. You have to take care of yourself, okay?" Her voice was so kind, so familiar. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of myself," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've always been a good boy. Remember to call us often. I have to get back to work now." She hung up. In my past life, my biggest regret was my parents. They were dragged down because of me. Under the Wang family's pressure, our home fell apart and their health failed. I remember that when I had the accident, my father was already in the hospital. My mother was out there, exhausted, trying to scrap together enough money for medical bills. "Mom, this time, I will bring you glory," I whispered to myself. I caught the shuttle bus to Zhonghai University. Once I was in my seat, I closed my eyes and focused on the samsara bead inside my mind. Even after 1,000 years of cultivation, I never figured out its secrets. I never expected it to follow me back in time. Was this the reason I was reborn? I didn't have the answer yet. After a 40-minute drive, we arrived at the freshman reception area. I was the last one to get off the bus. I walked behind the crowd, taking in the sight of the campus. Zhonghai University was the best in the province and top 10 in the country. The students here were the elite, survivors of the brutal college entrance exams. Only the incredibly wealthy or powerful could get in through connections. The campus was massive, nearly 4,000 acres of mountains and lakes. My department, the School of Foreign Languages, sat right by a beautiful lake. There were luxury cars everywhere. Most parents were personally dropping their kids off. About half of us arrived on the school shuttles. I let a senior student guide me through the registration process. Even though I had done this all before, I didn't mind. Once the paperwork was finished, I headed to my dorm. I pushed open the door and saw someone was already there. "Hi, I'm Zhang Yun," a medium-built guy with glasses said, standing up to greet me. He seemed shy. He was holding a thick English copy of Gulliver's Travels. For a Chinese high schooler to read that in the original English, he had to be talented. A wave of warmth hit me. "Zhang Yun. In my past life," He was the only true friend I had in college. While everyone else stayed away because of Wang Shuabin, Zhang Yun never left my side. He was bullied and marginalized because of it. Eventually, his family used their connections to send him abroad to study. I reached out and smiled. I'm Qin Feng, your roommate. We shook hands. I've already cleaned the room, Zhang Yun said with a bashful smile. You can sit anywhere. Thanks, I said, putting my backpack on my desk. It was a standard 4-person dorm with bunks over desks. We chatted for a bit, and I found myself enjoying the simple conversation. Soon, the other 2 roommates arrived. The third guy was a giant, nearly 6'1". His name was Wang Shuang, a loud, straightforward guy from the northeast. Then the final roommate showed up. His entrance was an event. His parents, relatives, aunts, and uncles, 7 or 8 people in total, marched in carrying bags and boxes of every size. The small 4-person dorm was instantly packed. I watched as a crowd of people pushed inside, making the room feel tiny. Oh my, this place is so shabby, a voice complained. It's worse than our nanny's room back home. I looked over. An elderly woman with white hair and expensive clothes was scanning the room with pure disgust. She turned to a handsome, clean-cut boy standing next to her. Young master, why don't we let Grandma rent a villa for you outside? If you stay here, my heart will break. It's fine, Grandma, the boy replied, sounding a bit annoyed. I can handle it myself. A middle-aged man with the aura of a big-time boss stepped forward, smiling at us. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry for the commotion. This is my son, Zhao Mingjie. He's been a bit spoiled since he was a kid. I'll have to trouble you all to look after him. He paused, then gestured toward the door. You guys haven't eaten yet, right? Come on, my treat. Let's get to know each other. A short while later, the 4 of us roommates were sitting around a dinner table. Zhang Yun went first. He was from Gannan province. His father was the 3rd in command of a county, and his mother was a teacher. It was a solid, respectable family. The Zhang family is very impressive, Zhao Hongsheng, Zhao Mingjie's father, said with a nod. I could tell his praise was empty, though. A high-ranking county official clearly wasn't enough to impress a man like him. Next was Wang Shuang. He was from Liaoqing in the northeast. His family owned a jade business worth hundreds of millions. This time, Zhao Hongxing's tone was much warmer. Student Wang, your family is wealthy, yet you're so independent. You have a bright future. Mingjie needs to learn from you. Even so, his expression remained calm. Even 100 million wasn't enough to truly shake him. Finally, it was my turn. I didn't feel like explaining my life. I'm from the countryside, I said simply. In my past life, I had rambled on at this table, red-faced and embarrassed by my background. This time, I said those 5 words with total indifference. The table went quiet for a second. Zhao Hongxing forced a smile. That's all right, Qin Feng. Don't be discouraged just because you're from a village. You can build your own future with hard work. Everyone else looked at me with a hint of pity. They assumed I was quiet because I felt inferior. I didn't bother correcting them. Zhao Hongxing lost interest in me immediately. He didn't say another word to me for the rest of the meal. To a man like him, a kid from the dirt was useless to his son's social circle. He probably thought I'd just drag his son's status down. At the end of the dinner, Zhao Hongxing introduced himself properly. He was the chairman of the Hongxing Group, one of the top 10 enterprises in Zhonghai City. His net worth was in the billions, spanning real estate, catering, and clothing. With billions in the bank, he felt entitled to look down on everyone else. What he didn't know was that in my eyes, he was an ant. I was once the 9 heavens immortal emperor. Entire empires had knelt before me. His little company meant nothing. After dinner, the sun began to set. Zhao Mingjie's family took him away for a while, leaving the 3 of us to walk back. It was only a 10-minute stroll, but I wasn't heading back to the dorm yet. I've got something to take care of, I told Zhang Yun and Wang Shuang. They didn't think much of it and headed back without me. I needed to cultivate. Right now, my divine powers and treasures were gone. I was just a mortal who knew some martial arts. A single bullet or a sharp knife could kill me. That feeling of vulnerability was driving me crazy. I walked through the campus, focusing my senses on the flow of spiritual energy. It wasn't the same everywhere. Usually, the best spots were deep in the mountains, far from the city. But I needed something now. After walking for a few miles, I stopped. I had found the densest pocket of energy on campus. It was a secluded willow grove next to a large lake. A cool breeze swept across the water, making the summer heat vanish. I found a flat stone, sat down cross-legged, and faced the shimmering water. Cultivation has 9 stages: chi refining, foundation building, xiantian, golden core, nascent soul, soul transformation, void returning, Tao integration, and tribulation transcendence. Chi refining is just the beginning. Once I reached foundation building, I'd have the strength of 1,000 pounds and the speed of a tiger. I'd be able to use minor spells without needing talismans. My lifespan would double. If I hit the xiantian realm, I'd be like a god to these people, flying through the sky and calling the rain. I need to focus on chi refining first, I whispered to myself. Foundation building can wait. The energy on Earth was thin compared to the immortal realm. Progress would be slow. But I had a massive advantage: my experience. I wouldn't hit any mental blocks or bottlenecks. My journey back to the top was more like recovering what I'd lost rather than learning it for the first time. The only question was which technique to use. I needed something fast, but I couldn't sacrifice a solid foundation. As an emperor, I knew countless powerful arts. But the more powerful the art, the harder the requirements. I thought about the xiantian sky roaming record I had learned at the Xiaoyao sect. It was one of the top techniques in existence. Its power was undeniable. I took a deep breath and began. I knew what the xiantian sky roaming record could do. As the 9-dust immortal emperor, my past achievements proved its power. I had once dominated my entire generation. But there was a catch. To practice that technique, I needed high-density spiritual energy, rare medicinal pills, and unique natural treasures to act as a catalyst. In the current environment on Earth, I couldn't find a single one of those things. I could have chosen an easier technique. It would have saved me a lot of trouble in the early stages. But that path led to an unstable foundation. If I went that route, I'd never reach the tribulation transcendent stage. I might not even make it to soul transformation. Even if I found a way to fix my foundation later, it would require a massive stroke of luck. I searched through my memories, flipping through every manual I had ever seen. Suddenly, a strange technique appeared in my mind: the fortune reincarnation script. I scanned the text. I had no memory of this. Usually, if a technique was worth remembering, I had studied it thoroughly, even if I hadn't practiced it. I was certain I had never seen this in my past life. I frowned, deep in thought. That's when I noticed the reincarnation bead inside my head. It was glowing with a faint, white light. A moment later, the light faded away. The fortune reincarnation script and the reincarnation bead. There had to be a connection. I decided to study the script carefully. Before long, I had memorized the chants. To my surprise, this part of the technique only covered 3 realms: chi refining, foundation building, and xiantian. There was nothing for the stages beyond that. I thought about it for a moment and made my choice. I would practice it. First, from what I could see, this script was stronger than any technique I had ever encountered. More importantly, it was perfect for an energy-depleted world like Earth. Even if I didn't have the later stages yet, I could always switch techniques later. Having a rock-solid foundation was worth any price. Seize the fortune of heaven and earth. Control the reincarnation of life and death. Those were the opening lines. As soon as I started, spiritual energy rushed toward me like a flowing stream. It didn't stop there. The trees, the flowers, the lake water, and even the soil began to release energy. It all flowed into my body. Every type of elemental energy merged into me without any resistance. I had practiced for 1,000 years, but this left me shaken. I finally understood what it meant to seize the fortune of heaven and earth. Everything in existence could be taken and used for my cultivation. It was miraculous. The feeling was incredible. It felt like I was back in the Hentian star realm. The environment wasn't as good as a top-tier sect's hidden paradise, but it was as good as any standard cultivation spot. No wonder the script said it was suitable for any location. At this rate, I was confident I could reach foundation building in 3 months. If anyone from the immortal realm heard me, they'd call me an idiot. Most cultivators spent decades reaching foundation building. A true genius with endless resources might do it in 10 years. In my past life, it took me over a decade. The fastest record in history was 3 years. The night passed quickly. When I finished my session, I had already reached the first level of chi refining. I could feel a faint trace of magic power in my body. I finally had a little bit of strength to protect myself. My stomach growled. The hunger was sharp and immediate. It was a hassle not having fasting pills. I wouldn't be able to solve the hunger problem until I reached the Xiantian realm. Cultivation required balance, so I didn't plan to push all the way to foundation building in one go. I jumped off the stone and walked toward the school cafeteria. As I passed a dormitory building, my feet stopped moving. Ouyang Jing lived here. She was my first love in my previous life. I stared at the building for a long time. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, Jing, since everything has started over, we'll have to get to know each other again. Everything starts fresh. I finished breakfast and went back to my room. My roommates, Zhang Yun and Wang Shuang, were curious about where I'd been all night. I just gave them a short answer and didn't elaborate. They could tell I didn't want to talk, so they dropped it. Registration lasted 3 days, so we had nothing to do. Zhang Yun spent the day studying English. Wang Shuang played games. I just lay on my bed. I wasn't sleeping. I was thinking about Ouyang Jing. After the ethereal fairy betrayed me, I had a natural fear of love. I didn't want to admit it, but the trauma was real. How should I act when I met Ouyang Jing again? I decided not to overthink it. I was living a second life. There was no need to be timid. I would let things happen naturally and live without regrets. My roommates watched me lying there all day and came to their own conclusions. Is he bringing a girlfriend to college? Wang Shuang asked, glancing at me. Hard to say, Zhang Yun replied with a shy smile. Wang Shuang put down his phone and sighed. Even if he did, he should slow down. Look at him. One night out, and he's completely exhausted. By evening, I was back on the large stone by the lake. I sat cross-legged and began to practice. I had my technique. Now I just needed time. In a noisy city, the spiritual energy was actually stronger at night. During the day, people moved around and drained the energy. I didn't want to waste a single second of the night. The next morning, I opened my eyes and exhaled a long breath. I felt refreshed. If only I had a foundation consolidating pill, I muttered. I could break through to the second level of chi refining immediately. I shook my head. In a place like this, I couldn't even make the liquid version of the medicine, let alone a pill. Those pills were perfect for chi refining and foundation building stages. They could even help a regular person clear the impurities from their body. In fact, if a normal person ate just one, a foundation consolidating pill could extend a normal person's life by 3 to 5 years. Of course, the effects didn't stack. No matter how many pills a regular person swallowed, they'd only gain about 10 years total. At the end of the day, they were mortals, not cultivators. Their fundamental life force remained unchanged. The liquid version was just a simplified substitute. Usually, only chi refining cultivators used it because they lacked the true essence to manifest alchemical fire. To truly refine pills, you needed to reach the foundation building stage and possess a natural talent for alchemy. Without that, chi refining cultivators were stuck using primitive methods, boiling herbs into a low-quality medicinal liquid. If I could just reach the foundation building stage, things would be different. I'd have enough spiritual power to set up simple formations to extract the pure essence from the herbs. That liquid would be far superior to anything boiled in a pot. But I was only at the first level of chi refining. For now, it was just a dream. Maybe I should head into the mountains, I thought, looking toward the distant peaks. I might find something unexpected there. I checked the time on my phone and let out a soft sigh. As I stepped out of the willow grove, I spotted someone. A girl in a white tracksuit was practicing her strikes in a clearing by the lake. She had a high ponytail and a sharp, clean look. Her face was beautiful, with willow leaf brows and a cold, focused expression. Her technique was a bit green, but her movements had structure. Based on her current skill, she could easily take down 3 or 4 grown men. There was something familiar about her style. Not because it was impressive. To me, it was nothing, but I'd seen it somewhere before. Even with the strength of an ordinary person, I could have ended her in a single move. I shook my head slightly and turned to leave. She noticed. She pulled back her fist, turned around, and caught me mid-shrug. You seem to look down on my kung fu, she said. We were only about 5 meters apart. I don't, I replied calmly. I didn't stop walking. She stepped in front of me, blocking my path. She stared me down. You're lying. I saw you shake your head. You had a look of disdain on your face. I almost laughed. I definitely shook my head, but I knew my face was a mask. As an old monster who had lived for 1,000 years, I didn't let my emotions slip that easily. She was just making up an excuse to confront me. It was actually quite amusing. I looked at her. Beads of sweat lined her forehead. I don't look down on you, I said softly. I just feel it's a pity. What do you mean? She asked, looking like a confused student. I decided to be generous. Honestly, for someone your age, your skills are decent. But it's obvious you've been practicing in isolation. Your moves look good, but you're full of openings. In a real fight, you'd suffer. She looked shocked. It seemed someone had told her this before. Her eyes narrowed, and she raised her hands, shifting into a combat stance. Is that so? Then let's see how I handle a real fight with you. I blinked. You want to fight me? This was getting interesting. I couldn't even remember how many people I had fought over the last millennium. More importantly, I couldn't remember how many lives I had ended. I had traveled through star systems and stained my hands with the blood of thousands. And now, this girl wanted to spar. What's wrong? She challenged, arching a brow. You were just talking big about my lack of experience. Now that I'm offering a test, are you scared? I chuckled. You don't need to provoke me. It's been a long time since I've moved my muscles. I'll give you a round. It was like a man who ate steak every day suddenly wanting a simple bowl of cabbage. It was a refreshing change of pace. She looked happy I accepted, but then she frowned when I didn't move. I said I'm ready. Why aren't you getting into a stance? I held out my hands and smiled. I'm always ready. Arrogant, she snapped. She spread her feet, sank her knees, and held her palms out, one in front of the other. She locked her eyes on mine. Wing Chun. Yelena, she announced. That's why it looked familiar. Wing Chun was famous all over the country. I had seen it on TV before I began my first life as a cultivator. Even after 1,000 years, those memories were clear. Her version was slightly different from the movies, which made sense, since movies care more about visuals than actual combat. Yelena. The surname Yi? I wondered if she was a descendant of the famous Grandmaster Yi. Qin Jiuqin, I said, using the name I preferred. Please. Yelena moved. She was fast, closing the gap between us in a heartbeat. As she reached me, her left hand stayed up for defense while her right hand shot out in a lightning-fast strike. She looked confident. She really thought she was going to hit me. Then she saw it. I let a strange, knowing smile creep onto my face. She felt a sudden jolt of alarm. Her move was balanced, both offensive and defensive. She couldn't see a single flaw in her own technique. So why was I smiling? While she was still wondering, I moved. Before she could even register my movement, I clamped my hand onto her right wrist like a vice. At the same instant, I swept my foot against her left ankle. Her balance vanished. She let out a sharp gasp as she tumbled sideways, landing with a heavy thud on the grass. You lost, I said simply. Yelena turned her head, looking up at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. I just stood there, wearing a calm smile. How is this possible? She stammered, scrambling to her feet. How did you do that? She looked at me with a new sense of gravity. I had kept my strength low, using only as much force as an average person. If I had used my actual power, she wouldn't have been able to stand up at all. I liked her attitude, though. She wasn't making excuses. Nothing is impossible, I told her. You just haven't seen enough of the world. As for how I did it, I told you before. You have no real combat experience. Your form is full of openings. Against a real opponent, one mistake is all it takes to get you killed. And frankly, you're covered in flaws. Defeating you is easy. I expected her to get angry or throw a tantrum, but she didn't. Since she was being reasonable, I decided to be a bit more patient. I gave her a small nod, turned around, and started walking away. I hadn't gone 5 meters when her voice rang out behind me. Wait. I looked back over my shoulder, a playful glint in my eyes. What? You want another round? She shook her head quickly. No. The gap between us is too big. I want to ask you to teach me. Teach me how to improve my combat skills. I already told you, I replied, shaking my head. Real combat is something you have to experience for yourself. You can't learn it from a lecture. I took a few more steps, then paused. Actually, one more thing. If you want to get better, pick opponents who are at your level. Fighting someone too weak won't teach you anything, and fighting someone too strong just means you'll get crushed without learning a thing. That's my advice. Don't bother thanking me. I waved a hand dismissively as I disappeared into the distance. Behind me, Yelena bit her lip, staring at my back. Chin-Jochin, she whispered to herself. I'll remember you. The rest of the day was a blur of academic boredom. The class meeting was exactly like my past life. Self-introductions, electing class monitors, and a long-winded speech from the instructor. It was tedious. If I weren't trying to blend into this university environment, I wouldn't have wasted a second there. Military training for the freshmen wasn't starting for another 2 days. Seeing a window of free time, I left the campus. I had 2 goals. First, I needed to find a place deep in the mountains where the spiritual energy was more concentrated. Second, I wanted to find ingredients. Even if I couldn't brew a high-level spirit fluid yet, I could at least put together a medicinal bath to strengthen my physical vessel. The September sun was brutal, baking the earth as I hiked into Dongjing Mountain on the east side of the school. Beyond the main peak lay a vast range of nameless mountains that seemed to stretch forever. Most of these areas were untouched by humans. After a long stretch of rapid climbing, a few beads of sweat appeared on my forehead. I let out a frustrated sigh. Even though I had reached the first level of chi refining, my body was still mostly mortal. I couldn't ignore the heat or the fatigue yet. I found a shaded spot, sat cross-legged, and regulated my breathing. When I stood up again, the exhaustion was gone, and my mind felt sharp. The sun was starting to dip toward the west. I knew I had to move fast. My current vision wasn't enhanced enough to navigate the dense forest at night, and these woods would be crawling with snakes and insects once the light faded. As I reached a 3-way fork in the trail, I saw 3 people emerging from another path. The leader was a woman in her early 20s wearing white casual clothes. Behind her was a young man in a gray checkered shirt. Bringing up the rear was a middle-aged man with thick eyebrows and sharp, piercing eyes. He looked lean and dangerous. It was an interesting trio. I could tell immediately that none of them were ordinary people. All 3 had some martial arts training, but the middle-aged man was different. As he approached, I felt a faint, lingering sense of pressure. In my current state, low cultivation and a weak body, that man actually possessed the strength to threaten my life. Of course, I still had the combat techniques and experience of a supreme immortal. Even if a dozen men like him attacked at once, I could kill them. But the fact that he registered on my radar at all meant he was far beyond a normal human. I shifted my gaze to the woman in the lead. She was clearly the one in charge. Her hair was tied up high, and she had a cold, elegant beauty about her. There was a certain heroic aura in her eyes that reminded me of the girl I'd met by the lake, not in looks, but in temperament. If anything, this woman was even more stunning. Being a 1,000-year-old soul, I didn't let any emotion show on my face. I gave them a brief, neutral glance and kept walking toward the heart of the mountains. They noticed me too. As we passed each other at the fork, no one spoke. The middle-aged bodyguard instinctively stepped forward, shielding the woman and keeping his eyes locked on me. His expression was dead serious. He felt it too, the subtle threat radiating from me. Once I was a good distance away, the bodyguard turned to the woman and lowered his voice. "Miss, that man is a master. We should be careful." The woman looked back at my receding figure and shook her head. "He's just a passerby. Don't worry about it." The arrogant young man in the checkered shirt scoffed. "A master? He looks like a college kid out for a hike. Those types are everywhere." The woman shot him a sharp look, and he immediately shrunk back, silencing himself. The arrogant young man looked terrified of the woman, but he managed a forced smile and muttered an apology. I didn't care about their drama. I had a path to follow. I pushed deeper into the endless mountains, following the flow of spiritual energy. In my experience, places with high energy concentrations usually hide natural treasures. They are the perfect sanctuaries for a cultivator to grow. Time blurred as I hiked further into the wilderness, leaving the civilized world far behind. By the time evening arrived, I found myself standing at the edge of a massive cliff. I stopped and took a deep breath. The air here was electric. This was the most concentrated pocket of spiritual energy I had found so far, 3 times stronger than the lake back at Zhonghai University. It was a stark reminder of the difference between the city and the raw power of the mountains. If I stayed here, I could reach the foundation establishment stage in just 2 months, even without the help of rare herbs. That was a massive leap. I peered over the edge into the dark abyss below. I could feel it. The energy coming from the bottom of the canyon was even more potent. Whatever was down there was the source of it all. The sun was setting, and the shadows were stretching across the rocks. It was too dangerous to climb down in the dark. I decided to camp on the cliffside for the night and explore the depths at dawn. I sat cross-legged on the cold ground and began circulating the fortune reincarnation art. Immediately, the energy from the air, the trees, and even the soil began flowing toward me. I absorbed it all in silence. When I finally opened my eyes at sunrise, a surge of power washed over me. I had already broken through to the second level of chi refining. The speed was incredible. It felt like I was back in my old sect from my previous life. Even with the Earth's depleted resources, this cultivation technique was proving to be heaven-defying. I stood up and stretched, my joints popping like firecrackers. I felt stronger than ever. To test my progress, I walked over to a small tree about the thickness of my arm and threw a casual punch. Crack! The tree snapped clean in half and tumbled into the brush. I looked at my fist and smiled. This wasn't soft wood. It was a hardy mountain variety, yet it broke like a toothpick. If I hit a normal person with that kind of force, I'd shatter their bones instantly. If I hit a vital spot, they'd be dead before they hit the ground. What surprised me most was that I hadn't even used much spiritual power. My physical body was becoming tougher on its own. In the world of cultivation, there is a common saying, refining chi is easy, but tempering the body is hard. Most cultivators ignore their physical forms because top-tier body tempering techniques are rare, time-consuming, and incredibly expensive. They'd rather spend their limited resources on longevity. But the fortune reincarnation art was doing both simultaneously. It was a priceless gift. I walked back to the cliff's edge and looked down at the mist-covered floor of the canyon. Time to go down, I whispered to myself. Let's see if my luck holds up. I grabbed onto a thick cluster of vines and began my descent. The deeper I went, the thicker the energy became. The cliff wasn't a straight drop. Every 100 meters or so, there were gentle slopes that allowed me to rest and save my strength. After about half an hour, I finally touched the canyon floor. The spiritual energy here was 3 times stronger than it had been at the top. I couldn't help but grin. In a world as barren as Earth, finding a place like this was like finding an oasis in a desert. As I scanned the area, something green caught my eye. My heart skipped a beat. A Peiyuan herb. It was the primary ingredient for refining Peiyuan pills. I never expected to find one on this planet, yet here it was, the very first thing I saw. I hurried over and knelt beside the small plant. It was over 10 years old. While the age didn't strictly matter for the recipe, older herbs produced much higher quality pills. This find alone made the entire trip worth it. I carefully harvested the herb, ensuring the roots remained intact. But my luck was just beginning. As I pushed further into the heart of the valley, I started finding more. Useful herbs were everywhere. Then, tucked away near a damp rock, I saw it, a yulu flower. I stared at the yulu flower. It was perfect for refining pills to clear the mind and purify spiritual energy. Nearby, I found evergreen vines, which were excellent for tempering the bodies of beginner cultivators. Then, I spotted a white jade fruit. This was a treasure for nourishing the soul and calming the spirit. If I used it in a pill, the effects would be doubled. My heart hammered against my ribs as I moved deeper. No way, I muttered. A purple cloudgrass. I had already gathered over a dozen spiritual herbs, but my eyes were locked on a palm-sized, violet plant. In the true cultivation world, purple cloudgrass was incredibly rare. It was the primary ingredient for purple cloud pills, which could significantly boost the mana of a cultivator in the Xiantian stage. Back in my old life, the appearance of a single stalk would spark a bloodbath. Low-level cultivators would betray their brothers or murder their masters just to get their hands on it. The law of the jungle was the only law that mattered. I spent 2 hours scouring every inch of the canyon floor. I didn't stop until I was sure I hadn't missed a single leaf. By the time I finished, I had 15 high-grade herbs in my bag. It was strange. All of them were roughly 10 years old. Maybe it was just a coincidence. The purple cloudgrass was the crown jewel of my haul, but the real surprise was the 9 seeds attached to it. If I cultivated them carefully, I could grow 9 more plants. I took one seed and planted it back in the original spot. In the cultivation world, this was an unwritten rule. Unless you were a selfish monster, you never pulled a plant up by the roots without leaving hope for those who came after. I kept the other 8 seeds. I knew I could grow them better than nature could. Once I reached the foundation establishment stage, I could set up arrays to accelerate their growth. Whether the seed I left behind survived was up to fate. I checked the time. It was only 9 in the morning. I wasn't ready to leave yet. The spiritual energy here was too good to waste. I sat down cross-legged, the harvested herbs resting beside me. I activated the fortune reincarnation art once more. Energy surged from the trees, the remaining herbs, and even the soil itself. It flowed into me in a relentless tide. By the time I opened my eyes and stood up, it was 3 in the afternoon. I had broken through again. I was now at the 3rd level of chi refining. The breakthrough had happened even faster than the last one. It just proved how vital the density of spiritual energy was. I circulated my mana, feeling it flow through my meridians with newfound strength. It wasn't weak and thin anymore. Not bad, I said, clenching my fists. I hadn't expected to hit the 3rd level so quickly. At this rate, I could reach the foundation establishment stage in less than 2 months. With the herbs I'd found, it might be even sooner. I looked around the valley one last time, feeling a bit reluctant to leave. If it weren't for the freshman military training tomorrow, I would have stayed here. But I didn't need to rush. With these herbs, my progress wouldn't slow down. Once I hit foundation establishment, I could build a spirit gathering array that would make any location just as good as this canyon. That stage is where a cultivator truly begins to master their craft. At the 3rd level of chi refining, I finally had some real power to protect myself. Even if someone pointed a gun at me, they wouldn't be able to hit me. The pressure to get stronger was still there, but it wasn't desperate anymore. I wanted to live this life differently. I wanted to make up for the regrets of my past. University was one of those regrets. In my previous life, I was a top student, but a man named Wang Shuabin had made my college years a living hell. Aside from a few friends like Ouyang Jing and Zhang Yun, that time had been miserable. I wasn't going to waste this second chance. If being a student meant attending military training, then I would be there, even if the drills felt like child's play to me now. I tied my herbs together with a sturdy vine and began the climb back up the cliff. With my increased cultivation, I moved like a shadow. It took me less than 20 minutes to reach the top. As I stepped onto the ledge and stood up, 3 people appeared in my line of sight. 2 men and 1 woman. It was the same group I had seen at the crossroads yesterday. The beautiful woman was still in the lead. We were only about 8 meters apart. Both sides froze, surprised by the sudden encounter. I wasn't worried, though. Even at the 1st level of chi refining, I could have taken them. Now, they were nothing to me. Suddenly, the young man next to the woman pointed a finger at me and shouted, "Sister, the spirit-clearing rain fruit. We finally found it." He was staring directly at the bundle of herbs in my left hand. The other 2 shifted their gaze instantly. The woman pulled out her phone, checking a photo and comparing it to my haul. Her face lit up with excitement. "It really is the spirit-clearing rain fruit," she whispered. "It's exactly like the picture." I blinked, confused for a second. Spirit-clearing rain fruit. What the hell was that? I looked down at the white jade fruit in my hand. I almost laughed. They had mistaken a common white jade fruit for some legendary treasure. It was a low-level herb in the cultivation world, but apparently, on Earth, it had a fancy name and a high reputation. Before I could say a word, the young man stepped forward, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Hey kid, hand over that white fruit," the young man demanded. "Name your price." I felt my brow furrow. In my past life as a 1,000-year-old cultivator, I had stood at the peak of the immortal world. Emperors bowed to me. Sect leaders trembled at my name. Now, a pampered brat who didn't know the height of the sky was calling me kid. I wasn't a man of short temper, but I wasn't a saint either. You don't survive 1,000 years in the brutal world of cultivation by being kind-hearted. In that world, the kind people were always the first ones to end up in the dirt. I thought back to my death, the betrayal that cost me everything. I had been too soft then. I had lacked the basic instinct to guard my heart against those closest to me. I wouldn't make that mistake again. I could see they wanted the white jade fruit badly. It clearly had some great use for them. But the boy's arrogance rubbed me the wrong way. In my old world, anyone who spoke to me like that would already be in hell. A cold light flickered in my eyes. "Shut up," the woman snapped at the boy. She turned to me, her expression calm and apologetic. "I'm truly sorry, sir. My brother has been spoiled since he was a child. Please, overlook his rudeness. But that white fruit in your hand, I really need it. I hope you'll consider selling it to me. Price is not an issue." I looked at her. She was beautiful, almost excessively so, but I didn't care about that. I didn't answer her request. Instead, I asked a simple question. "What is your name?" The woman froze. She clearly wasn't expecting me to jump from a business negotiation to a personal question. She stammered, unable to find her words, but her brother took it the wrong way. He thought I was hitting on her. "You're bold, kid," he roared. "My sister's name isn't something a nobody like you gets to know." The chill in my gaze deepened. "Then I'm done here. I don't like talking to strangers." I didn't give them another glance. I turned and started to walk past them. But as I drew level with the group, the middle-aged man who had been standing silently moved. He stepped directly into my path, his face like stone. "The young lady hasn't dismissed you," he said coldly. "You can't leave." I could tell this man sensed a threat from me earlier, but as a bodyguard, he had a job to do. He wasn't going to let me walk away while his employer was still talking. I looked up at him. "Move, or suffer the consequences." The man's anger flared. He was a professional, and being threatened by a skinny youth was an insult to his pride. "You're arrogant, kid. Let's see these consequences." "Fine," I said softly. "You'll see them right now." Before the words fully left my lips, we both struck. Our right fists collided in midair with a dull thud. To any observer, it looked like a mismatch. My fist was a full size smaller than his, and my frame was lean compared to his muscular build. Then came the sound. Crack. It was sharp and unmistakable. The man let out a strangled scream as he was sent flying. He traveled nearly 4 meters through the air before hitting the ground with a heavy thud. He clutched his right arm with his left hand, writhing in the dirt. Even though the pain must have been agonizing, he bit his tongue after that first scream, refusing to make another sound. I had to give him credit. His willpower was strong. If I were still at the first level of chi refining, he might have walked away with just a bruise. But I had reached the 3rd level. That one punch, simple as it was, carried the full weight of my cultivation. "You bastard," the younger man screamed. He pulled back his fist, ready to charge at me in a blind rage. "Stop," the woman cried out. She stepped between us, her hands raised to hold her brother back. She looked at me, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and respect. "Please, don't. I'm so sorry. My name is Mo Qingchen. This is my brother, Mo Qinglin, and that is our family guard, Hezhong. We were reckless. It's all our fault. Please, forgive us." She wasn't stupid. After seeing that punch, she knew her brother wouldn't last a second against me. More importantly, I still had the fruit she needed. If she made an enemy of me now, her goals were finished. Mo Qinglin stopped. He wasn't a complete fool either. If Hezhong couldn't take a single hit, he stood no chance. He glared at me, then turned to help the bodyguard up. Hezhong's face was pale with pain as he leaned on the boy. He looked at me, his voice raspy. "Late-stage internal strength." Mo Qingchen gasped, her eyes widening as she stared at me. "What? He's a late-stage internal strength martial artist? At his age? How is that possible?" I stood there, feeling slightly confused. Asterisk internal strength? Late stage? Asterisk. I had no idea what they were talking about. I'd never heard those terms in my past life. Hezhong ignored her shock and bowed deeply toward me, despite his shattered arm. "Sir, that punch, it was at least late-stage internal strength. Maybe even great perfection. Otherwise, an early-stage practitioner like me wouldn't have been defeated so easily. I was arrogant. Please, accept my apologies." He knew the score. If he didn't apologize now, the 3 of them wouldn't survive another minute if I decided to finish what he started. Hezhong didn't care about his own pride anymore. He was terrified that his arrogance would end up getting his young master and lady killed. If that happened, he could die 100 deaths and still not atone for his failure. Mo Qingchen stood there, completely stunned. Coming from a powerful family, she grew up surrounded by bodyguards like Hezhong. She knew exactly how terrifying internal strength martial artists were. Someone like Hezhong, even at the early stage, could easily take down 4 or 5 elite special forces soldiers at once. As for late-stage or great perfection experts, she had only ever heard of them in legends. Now, standing in the middle of these mountains, she had run into a young man who looked even younger than her, yet possessed that exact level of power. It was hard for her to wrap her head around. I listened to them, feeling a bit out of the loop. Internal strength? I guess that was just the local term for cultivators on Earth. In my past life, I was at a level so high that I never dealt with people this weak, so I genuinely had no idea what they were talking about. What exactly is an internal strength martial artist? I asked. The three of them froze. They looked at me like I was an alien. With the power I just displayed, not knowing the basics of martial arts seemed impossible. If it weren't for the dead serious expression on my face, they probably would have thought I was mocking them. Hezhong was the first to snap out of it. Sir, you really don't know the term? Then the true qi in your body. How did you cultivate it? Oh, the true qi? I gave a casual shrug. I just figured it out on my own. I kept it vague, and Hezhong was smart enough not to pry. He quickly explained that once a person cultivates true qi, they are considered to have internal strength. It's divided into 4 stages: early, middle, late, and great perfection. I nodded. It made sense. It was just a different naming convention for the 9 levels of qi refining I was used to. Curiosity got the better of me, so I asked, and what comes after great perfection? Hezhong's expression turned solemn. Once you break through that limit, you reach a new realm called transformation strength. People at that level are honored as grandmasters. Grandmaster? I mused over the title. It sounded prestigious, but I wondered if their grandmasters actually had the skills to back up such a heavy name. While I was lost in thought, Imo Qingshan spoke up tentatively. Sir, that white fruit in your hand. I really need it. Would you be willing to sell it to us? Price is not an issue. I looked down at the white jade fruit. To be honest, it wasn't that useful to me. Even if I turned it into a pill, its effects would be negligible for my cultivation. However, I realized I was going to need a lot of rare herbs to progress, and I didn't have the time to hunt for every single one myself. Buying them was the best option, but I was currently broke. These 3 clearly had deep pockets. You want this? I asked, looking at her. How much are you offering? Mo Qingshan's face lit up with hope. I'll give you 1 million for it. If that's not enough, we can negotiate. I could tell she was desperate. I smiled slightly and held up 5 fingers. 5 million. Take it or leave it. 5 million, her brother, Imo Qinglin, shouted. That's highway robbery. I shot him a cold glance. It's a better deal than robbery. If you don't like it, forget it. I turned to walk away. I wasn't actually overcharging them. A 10-year-old white jade fruit might be common in the immortal realms, but on Earth, it was a priceless treasure. Finding another one would be nearly impossible. 5 million was a bargain. Wait. Mo Qingshan stepped in front of me, glaring at her brother to shut him up. Fine. 5 million. I agree. But we're traveling and don't have that much cash on us right now. She pulled out a bank card and handed it to me. There are 3 million on this card. I'll transfer the remaining 2 million as soon as I get home. Sister, you can't. Mo Qinglin started, but she silenced him with another look. In an era where mobile payments weren't everywhere yet, carrying a card with millions on it was rare. It confirmed my suspicion that they were incredibly wealthy. I took the card without hesitation. Just remember, you owe me 2 million, I said. My name is Qin Feng. I wasn't worried about being cheated. If she tried to scam me, I'd make sure she paid a price far worse than $2 million. Mo Qingshan seemed stunned by how easily I trusted her. I didn't ask to check the balance, I didn't ask for a receipt, and I didn't even ask for her ID. It was as if a $5 million deal meant less to me than buying a snack at a convenience store. She looked into my eyes and saw a calm, indifferent gaze that seemed to look down on the entire world. She suppressed her confusion and handed me a business card. Mr. Qin, please rest assured. This is a fair trade. Here is my contact information. Could I have your phone number as well? I'd like to stay in touch once the transfer is ready. She clearly wanted to stay on my good side. Since she was being respectful, my annoyance from earlier vanished. I gave her my number, handed over the fruit, and walked away into the shadows of the mountain. I handed the white jade fruit to Mo Qingshan without a second thought. Her brother had been a nightmare to deal with, but her face lit up with genuine joy the moment her fingers touched the fruit. Thank you, Mr. Chin, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Truly thank you. She held the fruit like it was the most precious treasure in the world. Seeing her smile, something stirred deep inside me. A strange sense of familiarity washed over me, a warmth I couldn't quite place. I took a deep breath and pushed the feeling down. I had work to do. Miss Amo, I asked calmly, what exactly do you plan to do with that? She blinked, coming out of her trance. Mr. Chin, what did you call this? A white jade fruit. Is this not the clear spirit jade fruit? I looked at the small, pale fruit in her hand and chuckled. I've never heard that name in my life. But I can tell you for a fact, that is a white jade fruit. If you feel like I've misled you, we can cancel the deal right now. Give me the fruit, and I'll give you your money back. She went silent, lost in thought. She was smart enough to realize I wasn't trying to scam her. If I wanted to lie, I wouldn't have brought it up at all. Maybe the name just changes depending on the region? Mo Qinglin chimed in, surprisingly showing a bit of common sense for once. Mo Qingchen's eyes brightened. Of course, different places, different names. It's the same thing. Just a reminder, I said, my voice cold. The white jade fruit nourishes the soul and calms the mind. If you agree to this trade, there's no going back. Even if it doesn't work for your specific needs, you still owe me that remaining 2 million. She looked at me with renewed shock. You even know its medicinal properties? If it does what you say, then it's exactly what we need. It's perfect. So, you're using it to save someone? I asked. She nodded. I won't hide it from you. My grandfather fell into a coma recently after a sudden illness. Someone told us that a clear spirit jade fruit grew deep in the canyons of Mount Dongjing and that it was the only cure. That's why we came. I nodded slowly. I didn't push for more details. I could tell she was leaving things out, like who told them to come here or what the illness actually was, but I didn't care. Their family drama wasn't my business. The deal was done. There was no reason to linger, so the four of us began the trek out of the mountains together. Mr. Chin, if you don't mind me asking, Mo Qingchen said tentatively. Where do you work? I'm a student at Zhonghai University, I replied. I saw no reason to lie. She looked surprised, but she didn't lose her composure. To her, a young student who was also a high-level martial arts master was impressive, but not impossible. Once we hit the edge of the mountain, it was time to part ways. Hezhong was still nursing his injuries and needed a hospital immediately. Mo Qingchen promised again that she would transfer the rest of the money as soon as she got home. To be honest, I didn't care much about the difference between 3 million and 5 million. It was just a number. But if she tried to cheat me, that was a different story. Deception was something I wouldn't tolerate, especially after what I had been through in my past life. It was a line no one was allowed to cross. As I walked away, I heard Mo Qinglin's muffled voice behind me. Sister, are you really going to give him the rest? He hissed. That kid is extorting us. 5 million for a piece of fruit. We gave him 3 million already. We don't have a contract. We should just forget it. He wouldn't dare mess with the Mo family anyway. Watch your mouth. Mo Qingchen snapped, her voice sharp. Don't you realize who you're dealing with? There are people in this world you never provoke, and Mr. Chin is one of them. I can't even see the depths of his power. Hezhong groaned in agreement. The young lady is right. Master, do not provoke him. That boy is at least at the late stage of inner strength. At his age, he'll likely become a grandmaster. 2 million is a small price to pay to avoid his grudge. But sister, Mo Qinglin whined, we don't have any money left. Ever since Grandpa fell ill, second uncle's side of the family took over the finances. That 3 million was all we had saved up. My pockets are cleaner than my face right now. How are you going to pay him? I didn't stay to hear her answer. I had my own problems to solve. I headed back toward Zhonghai University, but I wasn't going to the dorms. Living in a shared room was becoming a massive headache. I was constantly sneaking out at night to cultivate, and I had no private space to brew the spiritual medicines I needed to boost my power. More importantly, I had 8 purple cloud grass seeds in my pocket. I needed a quiet, secluded place to plant them where they wouldn't be disturbed. A dorm room definitely didn't fit the bill. The solution was simple. I needed my own place. With 3 million in the bank, I could easily afford a decent house outside of campus. I didn't care about luxury or high-end neighborhoods. There was only one thing I was looking for. I needed a place where the spiritual energy was thick. I took a long look at the map and realized the spiritual energy near the school wasn't distributed evenly. The eastern side, right next to Dongjing Mountain, had a much higher concentration than anywhere else. It made sense. Behind that mountain lay a vast, endless range of wilderness, while the other directions were choked with people and city traffic. If I wanted to grow, I had to move east. The area near Dongjing Mountain was a bit of a ghost town. It was far from the city center and looked pretty run down. Even the popular student hangouts like Shaosher Street were all on the western side of campus. The east was desolate, quiet, and, most importantly, cheap. I spent the afternoon wandering through the clusters of old houses at the foot of the mountain. I wasn't just looking for a roof over my head. I was hunting for a pulse of energy. Finally, I stopped in front of a two-story building. It was an old-fashioned Western-style house with 3 sections, a separate one-story shack next to it, and a high wall surrounding a private courtyard. It looked ancient, but it had character. More importantly, I could feel a faint shimmer of spiritual energy radiating from the walls. It was stronger here than anywhere else in the neighborhood. I didn't even need to see the inside. I knew this was the place. If the owner was willing to sell it, even better. Growing purple cloud grass isn't a quick process, and I needed stability. I walked up and knocked on the heavy courtyard gate. After a moment, it creaked open. An older woman, maybe in her late 50s or early 60s, poked her head out and looked me up and down. I gave her my most polite, harmless smile. "Hello. I saw the sign outside about a room for rent. Is there still a vacancy?" Her face brightened immediately. She stepped back and waved me inside. As we walked through the courtyard, I noticed a small flower bed about a meter wide running along the wall. It was filled with common plants, but the soil looked decent. The woman explained that her children had all moved abroad. She and her husband couldn't bear to leave their hometown, so they stayed behind in the small one-story house. They only put the second floor up for rent because the place felt too lonely. Because it was so remote, hardly anyone ever came by. So far, they only had one tenant, a young woman who worked long hours and was barely ever home. The house was still too quiet for their liking. She led me up to the second floor and showed me a room. It was about 20 square meters, spacious enough for me, and it had a balcony that faced directly toward Dongjing Mountain. It was perfect. The rent was almost a joke. They weren't looking to make a profit. They just wanted some life in the house. They asked for 300 yuan a month. In the city, a room like this would go for at least 1,000. I didn't even try to haggle. I handed over a full year's rent on the spot. I had the money, and I didn't want any distractions. I decided to hold off on buying the house for now. Renting was simpler. I left my spirit seeds in the room, but headed back to the dorms for one last night. The room only had a bare bed frame, and I needed to buy some bedding before I could actually move in. When I got back to the dorm, Zhao Mingjie and the others were already there. They gave me these knowing, smirking looks. I knew exactly what they were thinking. They figured I'd spent the night at a hotel with some secret girlfriend. I didn't bother correcting them. I just climbed into my bunk and closed my eyes. The next morning, the nightmare began. Freshman military training. The entire campus was a sea of green camouflage. Everyone was gathered on the training grounds, divided by class, waiting for their instructors. The girls in my class were already complaining. "This uniform is so ugly. It completely hides my figure," one girl moaned. "The sun is brutal today," another added, shielding her face. "I'm going to be 10 shades darker by noon. I just hope our instructor is a handsome guy. That's the only thing that'll get me through this." I stood off to the side with Zhang Yun and the other guys, staying quiet. Suddenly, my ears twitched. I heard it before anyone else. The rhythmic, heavy thud of boots hitting the pavement. The instructors were here. Our group, consisting of 60 students from English Class 5 and Class 6, was assigned to a man named Xinhua. He was about 6 feet tall, built like a tank, and looked to be in his early 20s. His skin was bronzed from the sun, and his muscles looked like they were carved out of rock. He was clearly an elite soldier. But unlike the sunny, handsome soldier the girls were hoping for, Xinhua looked like he was having the worst day of his life. His brow was furrowed, his eyes were glaring, and his face was set in a permanent scowl. The disappointment among the girls was audible. To me, the training was incredibly dull. It felt like a PhD student being forced to repeat kindergarten. But I played along. It was 8 hours a day of marching and standing still, leaving my evenings free. After the first day ended, I went straight to the store. I bought my daily essentials and 8 oversized flower pots. I carried them back to my new rental and lined them up on the balcony. I filled them with soil and carefully planted the 8 purple cloudgrass seeds. I wasn't strong enough to set up a proper gathering formation yet, so I had to rely on the natural energy flowing from the mountain. Still, as I looked out at the peaks from my balcony, I felt a sense of peace. The days fell into a rhythm. Military training by day, cultivation by night. I spent most of my time in the corner of the courtyard, away from my balcony. I had to be careful. The law of heaven's reincarnation was powerful. If I cultivated too close to my seeds, the technique might accidentally drain the energy right out of them before they even had a chance to sprout. I still couldn't control the exact range of my energy absorption. Based on my current progress with the law of heaven's reincarnation, I estimated that everything within a 10-meter radius would be affected. To avoid killing my purple cloudgrass seeds, I had to move as far away from the balcony as possible. I didn't realize that my new cultivation spot sat directly beneath the window of the other tenant. My landlady had mentioned that a woman in her 20s lived on the second floor. I never saw her. I returned late every night to cultivate and left by 6 in the morning for military drills. She usually headed to work around 7. Since she never opened her window to look outside, we remained strangers for 10 days straight. Honestly, I didn't care who she was. My life was simple, but I still felt like I didn't have enough time to practice. I had no room in my mind for a neighbor. Her name was Su Ing. She was a nurse who chose this place because the rent was cheap, even though it meant a 90-minute commute to the hospital. She knew someone had moved into the room next to hers, but she had no idea who it was. Our schedules were complete opposites. By the time she got home at 8 or 9 in the evening, I was already hidden away, training. Even on weekends, she never caught a glimpse of me. If the landlady hadn't confirmed I existed, she would have thought the room was empty. She was busy with her own life, so she didn't give it much thought. 15 days of freshman military training passed in a flash. The final day landed on a Saturday, and I headed back to my rental early. Thanks to the medicinal liquids I had brewed from gathered herbs and my relentless training, I had successfully broken through. I was now at the 6th level of chi refining. I was only a step away from the late stages. Herbs were vital. Without that medicinal boost, even training in the deep abyss of the mountains wouldn't have brought me this far in 2 weeks. Cultivation only gets harder as you climb. Without external help, progress eventually stalls. This was exactly why I was so focused on the purple cloudgrass. Normally, it takes 5 years to mature. But if I could set up the right spirit arrays, I could cut that time down significantly. The older the herb, the higher the quality of the pill. I needed to reach the foundation establishment stage as soon as possible. Only then would I have the power to lay out those arrays. As I walked into the small courtyard, I saw a woman watering flowers by the garden bed. I knew instantly she was the neighbor from the second floor. After half a month, this was our first face-to-face meeting. Suing looked up and smiled at me. She introduced herself, telling me she worked at the Capital Hospital. I gave her a polite smile and took a quick look at her. She was gentle and pleasant, with short hair resting on her shoulders and light makeup that highlighted her fair skin. She wasn't a legendary beauty, but she had a very refined, graceful aura. She was shocked when she realized I was a student. She started firing off questions, asking why I was renting a place off campus and if I was living here with a girlfriend. As soon as the words left her mouth, she turned bright red. She realized she was being way too nosy with a stranger. She looked incredibly embarrassed. I didn't feel like explaining my life or dealing with her assumptions. I just told her it was for convenience and walked toward the house. I heard her sigh in relief behind me. In her mind, she probably flagged me as a weirdo. I didn't look rich, and my clothes were ordinary, yet I was paying for a private rental just for convenience. I didn't mind her judgment. The next morning was Sunday. Since military training was over, I headed to Dongjing Mountain Park. It was only about a kilometer from my place and featured a massive, clear body of water called Dongjing Lake. The environment was beautiful, drawing in crowds of seniors and fitness enthusiasts. Cultivation requires a balance of intensity and relaxation. While the other students had been exhausted by the drills, I had treated the whole thing as a way to clear my mind. The spiritual energy near the lake was even denser than at my rental. I took a deep breath and walked slowly along the shore. My mind was perfectly still. I closed my eyes and let my senses guide me. By the time I opened them, I had walked halfway around the lake. I felt a sudden surge of inspiration. I stood by the water's edge and began to practice a set of forms. It was the Xiao Yao 12 styles, the foundational technique every disciple in my former sect learned. It was a comprehensive system covering punches, palms, kicks, and footwork. Usually, a chi refining cultivator could only manage the first 3 styles. You needed to be at the golden core stage to master the full set. But my soul was that of a tribulation stage master. My insight was on a different level. Even at level 6, I could execute the first 3 moves with terrifying precision. I lost myself in the rhythm. I threw the first punch, stabilizing the mountains. I followed with the second palm strike, severing the rivers. Finally, I launched the third kick, stirring the clouds. My movements shifted between raw power and ethereal grace. I was a blur of motion against the backdrop of the lake. Good fist technique. A voice suddenly broke the silence, cutting through my concentration. I slowly pulled back my fists and exhaled, feeling the lingering heat in my muscles. I turned around to see a man in his early 20s walking toward me. He had a look of genuine surprise on his face. "Good technique," he called out, nodding in approval. "I've seen a lot of styles in my time, but I can't place that one. What do you call it?" I wasn't looking for praise. I didn't care much for his opinion, but he seemed polite enough, so I couldn't just ignore him. I kept my voice flat and indifferent. "Just something I put together myself," I said. "It doesn't have a name." The young man let out an awkward laugh. He could clearly tell I wasn't interested in a conversation, let alone making a new friend. But he was a martial arts fanatic, and my movements had hooked him. Despite the cold shoulder, he stepped closer. "I'm Du Chung," he said, offering a confident smile. "I can tell you've got real skill. I've been training for years myself. How about a spar?" I looked him over. He wasn't here for a chat. He was here for a fight. I saw the tension in his shoulders and the hunger in his eyes. I shook my head and gave it to him straight. "You're not good enough," I said. "Forget the spar." He froze. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't give him any face at all. Du Chung was stunned. He probably thought he was the most arrogant guy in Zhonghai City, but he'd just met someone who made him look humble. He didn't believe me for a second. Du Chung had joined the army at 18. By 20, he was a special forces soldier. Now, at 22, he had just been selected for the Wolf Fong Special Forces, the elite of the elite. There were only 9 units like it in the entire country. You couldn't get in with connections. You had to be a monster. He was currently on a 1-month leave before his final training began. To him, I looked like a kid who wasn't even 20 yet. Even if I'd been training since I was in the womb, he was certain he could take me. His expression soured. "Friend, you've got a big mouth," Du Chung said, his voice dropping an octave. "You're that sure I'm not your match? I've never lost a fight in the military. Since you're so confident, let's see what you've got." He wasn't lying. In his unit, they called him the King of Combat. I sighed. He wasn't going to let this go. I decided to end this quickly so I could get back to my day. "Fine," I said, echoing his own words back at him. "Since you're so confident, let's see what you've got." Du Cheng's eyes narrowed. He could hear the mockery in my tone. "Arrogant brat," he hissed. "Let's move to that open clearing away from the water. I don't want to accidentally kick you into the lake. I have no idea how deep it is." I smiled. It was a cold, thin expression. "Don't worry," I said. "This will only take 1 move. No need to move. As for how deep the lake is, you're about to find out for yourself." Du Cheng almost choked on his own rage. He didn't say another word. He lunged. He leaped into the air, his body coiling like a spring before snapping out a powerful whip kick toward my head. In combat, they say a punch is 30% of your power, but a kick is 70. It looked like a standard move, but I could see his plan. He was waiting for me to block so he could transition into his signature chain kicks, the move that made him undefeated in the army. He wanted to teach me a lesson. He wanted to break my pride. But before he could even think about changing his move, I stepped forward. My hand shot out like a lightning bolt. I caught his ankle midair. Du Cheng's eyes widened. He felt like his leg had been clamped in a massive steel vise. He couldn't move an inch. Then, with a casual flick of my wrist, I hoisted his 180-pound frame over my head. His brain went numb. This wasn't humanly possible. Before he could process the terror, I tossed him. He sailed through the air, arms flailing, heading straight for the center of the lake. Splash! He hit the water like a depth charge. A massive plume of spray erupted, and then he vanished beneath the surface. A few seconds later, his head popped up, gasping for air. He could swim, and I hadn't actually hurt him. I'd just humbled him. He paddled there, staring at me on the shore with pure, unadulterated shock. "Holy crap," he sputtered. You're incredible." "So," I said calmly, "how deep is the lake?" I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked away. "Wait, what's your name?" he shouted from the water. I didn't look back. I kept walking until his voice faded into the distance. I headed back to my rental room. I needed to brew more spirit fluid. If I kept up this pace, I could break through to the 7th level of chi refining in 3 days. That would put me in the late stages of the realm, and my power would skyrocket. Just as I was setting up, my phone buzzed. It was Zhang Yun. "Hey Zhang Yun, what's up?" "Qin phone. Don't forget the class reunion tonight at the hotel." "I'll be there," I said, my voice trailing off as I hung up. The reunion. I remembered it well from my past life. It was the night everything changed for our class monitor, Fong Qin. She was a top student, kind and brilliant. But something happened that night that forced her to become a rich man's mistress and drop out of school in shame. In my last life, I was weak. I watched it happen and ran away, too afraid to interfere. But this time, I wasn't running. I wanted to see exactly what kind of monster was hiding behind the scenes. I put my phone down, a sharp light flickering in my eyes. The Royal KTV was located over 10 kilometers away from Zhonghai University, right on the edge of the city's central district. Around 6 in the evening, I hailed a taxi and headed straight there. When I stepped out of the car, the entrance was lined with luxury rides. Mercedes, BMWs, and Audis were everywhere. Even though this wasn't the heart of the city, it was a heavily developed new district. The streets were neon-lit and bustling, packed with high-end restaurants, bars, and clubs. By the time I arrived, it was nearly 7. The Royal KTV was glowing with brilliant lights. As I walked into the lobby, 2 rows of hostesses in crisp uniforms and silk stockings bowed in unison to welcome me. They were slim, beautiful, and clearly well-trained. A waitress approached me with a professional smile. "Welcome, sir. How many in your party?" "I'm headed to room 1103, I said. Since there were 30 people in our class, our monitor, Fong Qin, had booked an oversized executive suite. The waitress led me through the plush corridors and pushed open the heavy door. I scanned the room. Almost everyone from the English class was already there. I was the last one to arrive. "Qin Feng, you're finally here," Zhang Yun called out, glancing at his watch. Talk about timing. 7 o'clock on the dot. I gave a small, non-committal smile, but said nothing. I found a quiet corner and sat down. As the night went on, the others lost themselves in drinking, eating, and singing, but I never touched the microphone. I just sat there with a glass of plain water. Nobody really cared that I was acting like an outsider. Over the last 2 weeks, the story of me introducing myself as a kid from the countryside had spread like wildfire. Most of my classmates looked at me as a joke. Even students from poor backgrounds didn't announce it like I had. Combined with my silence and lack of social grace, they looked down on me. To them, I was just a poor, introverted kid with no future. Aside from Zhang Yun, no one bothered to speak to me. I didn't mind. I had endured far worse insults during my 1,000 years of cultivation. My heart was as still as a deep lake. The star of the night was undoubtedly Zhao Mingjie. His father, Zhao Hongsheng, was worth billions. He was a major player not just in Zhonghai, but in the entire Jiangnan province. "Everyone listen up," Zhao Mingjie shouted over the music. "Meeting like this is fate. Drink whatever you want tonight. It's all on me." The room erupted in cheers. A student named Ma Chong, who was an expert at sucking up to power, shouted the loudest. "Young Master Zhao is so generous. A man like you is destined for greatness. I think we should all raise a glass to him. What do you say?" "Yes, let's toast," the crowd yelled. But there was one exception. I didn't move. I sat there with my glass of water, watching the spectacle. Ma Chong noticed my stillness immediately. He sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, look at young Master Qin Feng. This party is on Jie's tab. Even if you can't drink, You should at least show some respect, right? He put a nasty emphasis on the words, young master, a direct jab at my humble background. The rest of the class turned to look at me. Qin Feng, come on. We're all toasting Jia. Just have one drink, a guy nearby urged. Seriously, a girl added, sounding annoyed. Even I'm drinking, and I'm a girl. Don't be such a drag. The pressure mounted as everyone chimed in, demanding I show Zhao Mingjie the respect he was owed. Zhang Yan jumped in to save me. Qin Feng doesn't drink. Don't push him. I'll drink his share for him. I felt a spark of warmth in my chest. In my past life, I had cowered and joined the toast just to fit in, so this confrontation never happened. Zhang Yun, stay out of this, Ma Chong snapped. You can't drink for someone else. Just as Ma Chong was about to escalate, our class monitor, Fong Qin, finally spoke up. Enough. If Qin Feng doesn't drink, don't force him. Let's just focus on having a good time. The room went quiet instantly. Even Ma Chong backed off. Everyone knew Zhao Mingjie was obsessed with Fong Qin. He had been chasing her since military training, but she had never given him the time of day. Zhao Mingjie, wanting to look graceful in front of his crush, played the bigger man. All right. Qin Feng is a good student. Let's not peer pressure him. Come on, everyone else, drink up. The party resumed, but I was now officially isolated. I was a bit surprised that Fong Qin had stood up for me. In my previous life, we were both victims of our own tragedies and barely spoke. Looking at her now, I made a silent decision. I would change her fate tonight. To show off his wealth, Zhao Mingjie ordered 4 bottles of expensive Lafite wine. To him, it was pocket change. As the alcohol flowed, the atmosphere got rowdier, but I remained sober, sipping my water. Eventually, Zhao Mingjie got a bit tipsy and started bragging. I'm telling you guys, in Zhonghai, my old man is top tier. Whether it's the legal world or the underworld, the big shots have to give him face. Ma Chong was right there to fan the flames. Too true. The Zhao family is legendary. Who would dare disrespect you? Zhao Mingjie leaned back, his ego swelling. Exactly. Take the owner of this KTV, Huang Tianba. He used to be a massive triad boss with thousands of men. He's trying to go legit now, but even when he sees my dad, he has to bow and call him Brother Zhao. A girl from Zhonghai looked shocked. Huang Tianba? I've heard of him. People say he rules both the legal world and the underworld. He's got connections with every industry leader in the city, and some even say he is backing at the provincial level. His background is terrifying. Most of the students in the room came from ordinary families. Even the few rich kids among us couldn't begin to compare to a titan like Huang Tianba. In reality, even Zhao Mingjie's father, Zhao Hongsheng, wasn't in the same league. Zhao Mingjie was just bragging to save face. Sitting in the corner, I shook my head slightly. I remembered my past life. Back then, hearing these names made my blood boil with excitement. I used to admire those big shots and fantasize about becoming one of them someday. But now, it was just boring. Zhao Mingjie liked to show off, but he wasn't a bully. I didn't actually hate him. In my previous life, we were just roommates who never spoke because of Wang Xuebin's warnings. In this life, my mindset had changed completely, but it seemed we were still destined to be strangers. Time passed quickly as the party grew rowdier. Eventually, the class monitor, Fong Qin, stood up with 3 other girls to head to the restroom. I looked up, a slight smirk playing on my lips. I remembered this moment. In my past life, something happened while those 4 girls were at the restroom, something that cut the party short and got everyone kicked out by the staff. The details of what happened afterward were a mystery to the class, but rumors said Fong Qin was kept behind by a powerful man to spend the night. Later, stories spread that she had been taken in as a mistress. The shame was too much for her. She didn't even finish her freshman year before dropping out. I drained my glass of water and stood up. I followed them out quietly. Originally, I just wanted to see what really happened behind the scenes, but since Fong Qin had stood up for me earlier, I decided I would step in. I wasn't going to let her life be ruined again. The others were too busy partying to notice me leave. I was a ghost in that room. I followed the girls through the twisting corridors of the KTV until they reached the restrooms. I obviously didn't go in. I'm not a creep. Instead, I leaned against a wall near a corner and waited. A moment later, 5 men came stumbling down the hallway. They were laughing and shouting, clearly wasted. A thick-browed middle-aged man was being propped up by 2 others. He pointed a finger at a short, chubby man next to him. Huang-san, the drunk man slurred. You're doing a good job with this KTV. Giving it to you to manage was the right call. The chubby man, Huang-san, was the general manager here. He beamed at the praise. Thank you for the recognition, Lord Ba. Rest assured, if any new goods arrive at the KTV, I'll make sure you get the first taste. The thick-browed man was Huang Tianba himself, the legendary boss the students had been gossiping about. He was the real power behind this entire establishment. He slapped Huang-san on the shoulder and laughed. Good. You know exactly what I like. Stick with me, and you'll be rich for life. Just as they reached the restroom area, the four girls walked out. They had all dressed up for the party, but Fang Qin was in a league of her own. She wore a white dress that hugged her curves perfectly, showing off her long, pale legs. Even at 18, she had a figure that turned heads. With her delicate makeup and high heels, she looked like a pure, innocent elf stepping out of a dream. The other three girls were pretty, but next to her, they were just background scenery. Huang Tianba's bleary eyes snapped open. These girls didn't look like the princesses who worked at the KTV. They radiated an aura of purity that hit him like a drug. He was a predator by nature, and seeing them triggered his worst instincts. He reached out a hand to stroke Fang Qin's face, a lewd grin stretching across his muzzle. What a beautiful little bird. I'll take this one. Fang Qin flinched back, her face pale with disgust. What do you think you're doing? The four girls glared at them. They weren't scared yet. They knew they had 30 classmates nearby, including 8 guys. They thought they had backup. Huang Tianba's smile widened. Huang-san, where did you find these four? They've got spirit. I like that. Huang-san looked awkward for a split second, realizing they were just customers, but he didn't care. To him, pleasing his boss was the only thing that mattered. He turned to the girls with a cold stare. This is Lord Ba, Huang-san barked. You four should consider yourselves lucky he noticed you. Serve him well tonight, and you'll be rewarded. Before the girls could even respond, Huang Tianba swayed on his feet and pointed a finger directly at Fang Qin. You, he spat. Come here. 4 of them? No, I only want her. Huang Tianba's voice was thick with alcohol and malice. The others are just trash. Huang-san nodded frantically, eager to please his boss. He turned to Fang Qin, his face twisting into a snarl. You heard him, girl. Lord Ba picked you. That's more luck than you deserve from your past life. Now, get over here and hold him up. The 4 girls, who had been trying to act tough just moments ago, flinched. They took a collective step back, their confidence shattering. One of the girls was so terrified she turned to bolt, but she didn't get far. Huang Tianba's men moved like predators, cutting her off and grabbing her before she could scream for help. I watched all of this from a distance. Everything clicked. I finally understood how Fang Qin's life had been destroyed in my previous existence. This was the moment it all went wrong for her. Seeing their friend caught, Fang Qin realized they were in deep trouble. Run? Just go, she screamed, and the 3 girls tried to make a break for it together. But they were just students. Against 5 grown men who spent their lives brawling in the streets, they didn't stand a chance. Even though Huang Tianba was wasted, his 4 henchmen were sober and experienced. Within seconds, the girls were intercepted. Huang-san barked orders to the other 3 lackeys. Take these 3 away. Find out which room they came from and kick the rest of their friends out of the KTV. Move it. Yes, boss, they shouted. Huang-san grabbed Fang Qin, pinning her arms behind her back. She struggled, her voice trembling with panic. What are you doing? This is illegal. Let me go. Huang-san just laughed, a greasy, disgusting sound. Illegal? Go ahead and see if anyone dares to help you. Besides, you're about to become Lord Ba's woman. You really want your private photos leaked to the whole world. The other men joined in the laughter. Fang Qin's face went white. The threat was clear and cold. She realized then that these weren't just random drunks. They had real power behind them. Huang Tianba seemed to sober up slightly from the excitement. He stumbled over to Fang Qin, leering at her. Not bad at all. This one is high quality. She's mine tonight. The stench of cheap liquor and cigarettes hit Fang Qin's nose, making her stomach churn. I could see the regret in her eyes. She shouldn't have come to this party. As Huang Tianba reached out his meaty hand toward her face, she closed her eyes tight, shaking and helpless. Just as his fingers were about to touch her skin, a hand shot out of the shadows. It clamped onto Huang Tianba's wrist like a vice. "You can't touch her," I said quietly. The world seemed to stop. Fang Qin froze. Huang San and his goons stared in disbelief. They looked over and saw me, a kid barely 5'7", looking completely out of place. I held Huang Tianba's thick arm with my left hand, as if I were holding a piece of trash. Huang Tianba spun around, his eyes bloodshot. "Who the hell are you? You dare interfere with Lord Ba's business?" Fang Qin opened her eyes and gasped. She couldn't believe it. The person standing up for her was the poor kid from the countryside. The quiet, invisible student who never said a word in class. "Qin Feng, run!" she screamed, signaling me to get away. She was terrified for me. I looked thin and weak compared to these 5 thugs. In her mind, I needed to get back to our private room and get the other 30 classmates to help. Even if most were girls, numbers were our only hope. But Huang Sen wasn't letting anyone leave. "Run? You insulted Lord Ba. Nobody is going anywhere." One of the thugs handed the girl he was holding to his partner. Now one man was holding 2 terrified girls, leaving a massive, muscular bruiser free to deal with me. He cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing in the hallway as he stalked toward me. "Kid, let go of Lord Ba's hand," the thug growled. "Get on your knees and beg, and maybe I won't break every bone in your body." I looked at him and smiled. "Lord Ba." The thug blinked, confused. "Yeah. Good boy," I nodded calmly. "You're a very obedient grandson." The thug's face turned purple with rage. He realized I was mocking him. "You're dead." He swung a massive fist straight at my head. The girls screamed and shut their eyes. They didn't want to see my skull get crushed. They expected to hear the sound of me hitting the floor in a pool of blood. Instead, there was a sickening crack, followed by a blood-curdling scream. Fang Qin thought it was over. She was sure I had been crippled for life. But then, my voice drifted through the air, calm and steady. "I just praised you for being an obedient grandson, and then you try to hit me? I guess I need to teach you some manners." The 4 girls opened their eyes, and their jaws dropped. I was still standing in the exact same spot, my left hand still casually holding Huang Tianba's wrist. But the thug who had attacked me was on the floor, his right arm twisted at an impossible angle, howling in agony. I wasn't finished. I turned my gaze back to Huang Tianba. "If you can't even control your own dog," I said softly, "why do you need 2 hands? One should be plenty for a man like you." Snap! Another scream, this one sounding like a pig being slaughtered. I had snapped Huang Tianba's wrist clean through. His hand hung limp, the bone completely shattered. The sheer speed and violence of it left the others paralyzed. They couldn't process what they were seeing. The pain actually shocked Huang Tianba into total sobriety. "What are you waiting for?" he roared, clutching his mangled arm. "Kill him. Waste this brat." Huang San and the other 2 thugs let go of the girls and lunged at me all at once. Fang Qin and her friends didn't hesitate. They scrambled away and ran toward our room to get help. They weren't abandoning me. They were going for reinforcements. "You little brat. You're dead meat." Huang San, the chubby middle-aged man, led the charge. He had seen me move and knew I wasn't a normal kid. He approached with caution, his eyes full of murder. He thought he was being careful. He thought he had a chance. Huang San thought he was being clever. He moved with caution, waiting for an opening so he could retreat if things went south. It was a nice plan, but reality was much more brutal. In less than 3 seconds, it was over. As the 3 of them lunged, a series of sickening cracks echoed through the hallway. One by one, they hit the floor, howling in agony. For me, a cultivator at the 6th level of chi refining, taking down 3 ordinary men was as easy as breathing. Even if 300 of them had rushed me, the result would have been the same. It just would have taken a few more minutes. If we weren't in such a public place, I would have ended their lives right there. But I knew my limits in this world. I wasn't powerful enough yet to kill without leaving a trace, especially with high-tech surveillance cameras everywhere. This was a society ruled by law, and a dead body would bring endless trouble. I was stronger than the average person, but I wasn't ready to take on a modern nation. A strategic missile, a nuclear warhead, or even a high-caliber sniper rifle could still kill me. Because of those constraints, I showed these scumbags mercy. I settled for breaking their arms and legs, a small lesson for their grand arrogance. I stepped over the groaning bodies and walked slowly toward Huang Tianba. I looked down at him, my eyes cold. He clutched his shattered wrist, trembling as he looked up at me. What do you want? He stammered, his voice thick with terror. I'm telling you, I run the underworld in Zhonghan City. If you dare to. I didn't let him finish. I swung my hand and delivered a massive slap across his face. The force sent him spinning. He crashed into the corridor wall with a heavy thud and slumped to the ground, screaming. I calmly placed my foot on his oversized head, pinning him to the floor. Now I've dared. What are you going to do about it? To Huang Tianba, my foot felt like a heavy truck pressing down on his skull. He felt like his head was going to pop at any second. The pain and pressure finally snapped him out of his drunken stupor. For the first time in his life, he felt death closing in, ready to swallow him whole. Nearby, Huang San and the others tried to crawl away, dragging their broken limbs. They were paralyzed with a primal fear. To them, I wasn't just a kid anymore. I was a monster they couldn't even hope to fight. Just then, I heard a commotion. Fang Qin and the other girls returned, leading a large group of my classmates from the English dance class. Which bastard is looking for trouble with my classmates? A voice roared. It was Zhao Mingjie. He had been bragging in the private room when the girls ran in, crying about being harassed by drunks. Sensing a chance to show off, he had rallied the whole class to come to the rescue. But as they rounded the corner, they froze. The hallway was a mess. 5 large men were scattered across the floor, clutching their limbs and moaning in pain. I was the only one standing, looking as if I hadn't moved an inch. Seeing my classmates, I took my foot off Huang Tianba's head and stepped back. Zhao Mingjie stood there, stunned. His grand entrance was ruined. He looked at the carnage, then at me, his eyes filled with confusion and suspicion. You did all this? He asked quietly. Yes, I said. There was no point in denying it. I was the only one here, and the cameras had caught everything anyway. A collective gasp went up from the class. They couldn't believe that someone as skinny and quiet as me could be this violent. Ma Chong, who had spent the evening mocking me, felt his blood turn cold. Looking at the broken men on the floor, he realized that if I had lost my temper with him earlier, he'd be the one screaming for an ambulance right now. Zhao Mingjie, however, saw a different opportunity. Since he couldn't be the hero who saved the day, he decided to be the tough guy who finished the fight. He walked up to the groaning Huang San and delivered a brutal kick to the man's already broken leg. Huang San let out a fresh scream. You bastards! Zhao Mingjie shouted, kicking another man. How dare you touch my classmates? You're tired of living. Even if your boss, Huang Tianba, saw me, he'd have to show me some respect. He strutted over to the man I had been pinning down, raising his foot for another kick. But Huang Tianba had reached his limit. He knew that if he stayed quiet, he'd be beaten to a pulp by this loudmouthed kid. I'm Huang Tianba, the man on the floor roared, his voice desperate. Touch me again, and I'll make sure you never leave this KTV alive. The name hit Zhao Mingjie like a physical blow. His foot stopped midair. He stared down at the battered, bloody face on the floor, his face turning pale. You your Lord Ba? Huang Tianba, he stammered, his bravado vanishing instantly. He looked like he'd suddenly sobered up. Huang Tianba spat blood on the floor. In this building, who else would dare call themselves Huang Tianba? As if on cue, the sound of heavy footsteps filled the corridor. Dozens of men in black uniforms flooded into the hallway, at least 30 of them. They looked grim and dangerous. They quickly surrounded our group of students, and several of them rushed forward to help Huang Tianba to his feet. Zhao Mingjie's knees shook. He realized he hadn't been kicking a random drunk. He had been kicking the most dangerous man in the city. These weren't just security guards. They were Huang Tianba's personal hitmen. The moment Huang Tianba was being beaten, the security staff watching the surveillance monitors had already sounded the alarm. They immediately notified the head of security for the Huang Tian KTV, which was why 30 fierce-looking men were now flooding the hallway. My classmates, most of whom were fresh out of high school, began to tremble. They had seen scenes like this in movies and thought it looked cool or heroic, but facing it in real life was a different story. The bravado they felt minutes ago vanished, replaced by pure, cold terror. Even Zhao Mingjie, who usually acted like he owned the city, was now pale and shaking. Lord Ba, this is all a misunderstanding, Zhao Mingjie stammered, bowing low. I swear, I didn't mean to offend you. Please, for the sake of my father, Zhao Hongsheng, let us go just this once. Huang Tianba's response was a brutal kick to Zhao Mingjia's chest. The air left Zhao Mingjia's lungs as he was sent flying back against the wall. Who the hell does your father think he is? Huang Tianba spat, his voice cold. Even if he were standing right here, he'd have to get on his knees and beg for mercy. Zhao Mingjia lay on the floor, sweat pouring down his forehead. He knew the reputation of a man like Huang Tianba. This wasn't going to end with a simple apology. Suddenly, the mood in the hallway shifted. Instead of blaming the thugs, my classmates started glaring at me. They decided that this was all my fault. They thought if I hadn't been so aggressive, things wouldn't have escalated. If there weren't 30 armed men surrounding us, I'm sure they would have started screaming at me themselves. Huang Tianba noticed the tension. He turned his gaze toward me, a sinister smirk playing on his bloody lips. Little bastard, are you starting to regret putting your hands on me now? I felt a flicker of killing intent rise in my chest. Without a word, I stepped forward and delivered a stinging slap across his face. The sound echoed through the silent hallway. Everyone froze. They couldn't believe it. Surrounded by 30 hitmen, I still had the nerve to strike their boss. You're dead, Huang Tianba roared. Before he could finish his threat, I lunged forward. My hand clamped around his throat like a vice. I was too fast for him to react. If your men move a single inch, I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy tone, I will crush your windpipe. Do you believe me? Huang Tianba's face turned purple. Don't move, he wheezed out. The 30 men stopped in their tracks. Their faces were full of rage, but they didn't dare take another step. If it weren't for Zhang Yun and Fang Qin being stuck in the middle of this, I wouldn't have bothered with negotiations. I would have just finished him right there. Let them go, I commanded, staring into Huang Tianba's bulging eyes. Once they're safe, I'll stay and play with you as much as you want. I tightened my grip. He could feel the raw power in my fingers and the genuine intent to kill behind my eyes. He didn't waste another second. He frantically waved his left hand at his men. Let them go. Let them go, he croaked. The head of security, a man named Huang San, gestured for his men to step back. Clear a path. Let them through. My classmates didn't need to be told twice. They forgot all about their resentment toward me and scrambled toward the exit like frightened rabbits. Not a single one of them looked back. Not a single one asked what would happen to me. Only 2 people stayed behind, Zhang Yun and Fang Qin. Why are you still here? I asked, glancing at them. But what about you? Zhang Yun's voice was thick with worry. Fang Qin looked just as distraught. She knew I had only gotten into this mess because I stepped in to protect her. Don't worry about me, I told them firmly. I have my ways of getting out once you're gone. Now go. Seeing my resolve, they finally nodded and hurried away. I knew their first instinct would be to call the police once they were outside, hoping they could save me in time. Once the hallway was clear of my classmates, I finally released Huang Tianba's throat. He collapsed into a chair his men brought over, clutching his neck and coughing violently. He took a few sips of water, gasping for air, before looking up at me with eyes full of pure hatred. The 30 men closed in, surrounding me completely. This time, they weren't just using their fists. They were wielding machetes and heavy clubs. Kid, Huang Tianba rasped. In all my years, I've never been humiliated like this. Have you decided how you want to die? I looked around at the circle of thugs and let out a small, bored smile. You think these amateurs are going to stop me? Huang Tianba's eye twitched. You're arrogant, I'll give you that. You've got some skill, but no matter how good you are, you can't fight 30 armed men at once. I don't believe you can walk out of here. Is that so? I narrowed my eyes. Then feel free to try me. The urge to spill blood was becoming harder to suppress. A massive, tattooed man stepped forward from behind Huang Tianba. This was Tai, his top enforcer. He was famous for once taking down 17 men by himself in a street fight. He was a lunatic who didn't care about his own life. Lord Ba, this kid talks too much, Tai said, cracking his knuckles. Let me teach him a lesson. Huang Tianba nodded. Fine, just keep him alive for now. I want to have my fun with him later. Tai stepped into the center of the circle, his eyes locked on mine. Come on, boy. Let's see what you've got. He didn't wait for an answer. He lunged, throwing a heavy punch aimed straight for my face, the veins in his arm bulging with power. If that punch had landed on an ordinary person, it would have killed them or left them crippled. This man was playing for keeps. Since he was moving with such lethal intent, I didn't see any reason to hold back. I didn't wait, lashing out with a kick, my foot moving faster than his fist could travel. My boot slammed into Atai's chest with the force of a battering ram. The impact sent him airborne. He flew 5 meters back, soaring over the heads of the other thugs before smashing into the far wall with a sickening thud. He slid to the floor like a rag doll and didn't move again. Huang Tianba's face went pale. He stared at the spot where his top enforcer lay crumpled. This was his best fighter, a man known for his brutality, and he'd been dismantled by a college kid in a single move. Atai wasn't dead, but he wished he was. He felt like he'd been hit by a speeding semi-truck. His internal organs felt like they were exploding. He coughed up a thick spray of blood and collapsed, his body going limp. Huang Tianba's facial muscles twitched. Rage finally overcame his shock. He waved his hand at the 30 men surrounding me and screamed, "What the hell are you waiting for? Kill him." The men in black looked at each other, nodded, and raised their machetes and clubs. They lunged at me all at once. Huang Tianba sat back, his eyes cold. He figured no matter how well I could fight, I couldn't handle dozens of armed men. He was wrong. "You're asking for death," I muttered. I moved. To them, I was a blur, a phantom flickering through the crowd. Even with my current limited cultivation, my strikes carried 1,000 pounds of force. Every hit I landed broke bone or ruptured tissue. Their blades and clubs swung wildly, but they couldn't even touch the hem of my shirt. I reached out and snatched 2 machetes from their hands. Then, the air filled with the rhythmic sound of steel meeting flesh. It took less than a minute. The hallway outside the restroom turned into a scene from a horror movie. Thugs lay everywhere, groaning and wailing in agony. Some clutched broken limbs. Others lay in pools of their own blood, missing hands or feet. The only person still sitting was Huang Tianba. He looked frozen, his jaw hanging open in disbelief. I tossed the left machete aside and let the right one drag on the floor as I walked toward him. The blade made a sharp, screeching sound against the tiles. To Huang Tianba, it sounded like the tolling of a funeral bell. I reached him and kicked him square in the chest, sending him flying off his chair. I took his seat, sitting down calmly as I looked down at him. "Now," I said softly, "it's my turn to ask. How do you want to die today?" Huang Tianba stared at me, his mind racing. He had never seen anyone fight like this. This wasn't just skill, it was something terrifying. But he was an old dog in the underworld, and he knew how to play his cards. He suppressed his fear and tried to steady his voice. "Little brother," he said, shifting his tone from condescending to cautious. "You're a hell of a fighter. But no matter how fast you are, can you outrun a bullet? I've seen experts like you before. Most of them end up dead from a sniper in the dark." I leaned forward, the long blade in my hand swaying back and forth. "Are you threatening me?" Huang Tianba felt a chill run down his spine. He immediately softened his stance. No, it's a misunderstanding. I'm just saying, it's better to make friends than enemies. I was in the wrong today, but your friends weren't hurt, so why don't we call it even?" He was lying, of course. I could see it in his eyes. He just wanted to survive the next 5 minutes so he could come back later with a small army. I stood up and smiled. I walked over and tapped the flat of the blade against his fat cheek. "I know you're not convinced. If you want revenge, feel free to try. But hear me clearly. If you ever cross me again, I will personally send you to hell." I spun the machete in my hand and threw it behind me. It whistled through the air and embedded itself deep into the stone wall. Half the blade disappeared into the masonry with a heavy thud. I turned and walked away. I didn't kill him right then because I had to be practical. With my current strength, being a wanted man across the country would make my life a headache. I had things to do, and being a fugitive didn't fit the plan. These people were ants to me. If they crawled back, I'd crush them then. Once I reached the foundation establishment stage, killing without leaving a trace would be easy anyway. Interestingly, I noticed that even though Zhang Yun and Fang Qin had called the police, no one had arrived at the KTV. Huang Tianba clearly had deep connections in the city. It was a good reminder. Until my power reached a certain level, I had to play the game smart. In my past life, I saw many geniuses die young because they thought they were invincible before they actually were. Everything has a limit. But once I reached the peak, Then, and only then, would I ignore all the rules. Just outside the KTV, I ran into Zhang Yun and Fong Qin. Qin Feng. Zhang Yun rushed over, looking me up and down. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, feeling a small spark of warmth. He was the only real friend I had in this life so far. Fong Qin bowed deeply to me. Qin Feng, thank you. I'm so sorry for getting you into this mess. Don't worry about it, I replied casually. I just happened to be there. You saved me, she insisted. Then she looked confused. The police still haven't shown up. How did they let you go? They both stared at me, convinced I must have paid a heavy price or made a desperate deal to escape dozens of thugs. I just gave them a mysterious smile. Maybe they just suddenly found their consciences. I didn't wait for them to ask more questions. I just looked at them and said it was time to go back. They could tell I wasn't in the mood to talk about the details, so they just nodded. The three of us hailed a taxi and headed straight back to the university campus. Back at the Dynasty KTV, the scene was chaotic. After I left, the remaining staff scrambled to get their injured brothers to the hospital. I had been precise with my strikes. No one was dead, but most of them were looking at a lifetime of disability. Huang Tianba was eventually settled into the most expensive private suite in the hospital. His manager, Huang San, stood by his bedside with his arm in a sling and a bandage wrapped around his neck. Huang San, did you find him? Huang Tianba asked. His voice was cold, dripping with murderous intent. Huang San bowed his head respectfully. Eighth Lord, we have. He's a freshman at Zhonghai University. His name is Qin Feng. He's from a small rural village in Wudong County, Lingnan Province. It had only been 2 or 3 hours, yet they had already stripped my identity bare. That was the extent of Huang Tianba's reach in this city. Huang Tianba's eyes widened in disbelief. What? Just a kid from the countryside? With that level of martial arts? Does he have any other background? According to our records, no, Huang San replied. He's ordinary. No one has ever heard of him knowing Kung Fu. The only thing special about him is his grades. That's how he got into Zhonghai. Huang Tianba let out a harsh snort. Good grades are useless. He's just a poor student. As long as he doesn't have a powerful background, this is easy. Huang San hesitated for a moment before whispering. Eighth Lord, do you want me to use our connections? We could easily frame him and throw him in prison. Huang Tianba had ruled the streets of Zhonghai for years, and he didn't do it just with his 1,000-man gang. He had deep roots in the legal and political world. Sending a nobody to jail was a simple task for him. Huang Tianba went silent, his brow furrowed in thought. Then, he shook his head slowly. That little brat broke my hand. I have to settle this debt personally. Sending him to prison is too good for him. His eyes flashed with a lethal light. Understood, Eighth Lord, Huang San said. He knew exactly what that look meant. Huang Tianba was going to kill me. The next day was Monday, the official start of classes. When my classmates in the 5th English class saw me walk in completely unharmed, they were stunned. Zhang Yun and Fong Qin had told them I was safe, but they couldn't wrap their heads around it. They all assumed that the police report had scared Huang Tianba off. None of them could have imagined the truth. I didn't say a word. I just found a quiet spot in the corner and sat down. Our first teacher was Mu Lingmei, our substitute class advisor. She was around 26, tall, and strikingly beautiful in a cold, elegant way. She was a PhD graduate who had studied abroad, and she was the dream woman for half the students and staff at the university. In my past life, Mu Lingmei had been very kind to me, mostly because I excelled in English. Teachers always favor the top students. But for some reason, back then, she had resigned after only 1 semester and vanished. I never saw her again. I wasn't thinking about her today, though. My mind was fixed on a specific moment, the time and place where I was supposed to meet my first love, Ouyang Jing. I couldn't help but smile. I didn't hear a single word of the morning lecture. As soon as classes ended, I headed straight for the library. That was where we had first met. I found the exact corner from my memories and pulled a book from the shelf. I waited. Time seemed to crawl. Half an hour felt longer than a century of closed-door cultivation in the immortal realm. Then, she appeared. She wore a simple white dress. Her skin was fair, her features delicate, and her large eyes were exactly as I remembered them from 1,000 years ago. Her black hair was clipped back with a light blue pin, with a few stray strands framing her face, giving her a pure, ethereal look. This was Ouyang Jing. In my past life, part of the reason I had chosen the ethereal fairy as my companion in the cultivation world was that she looked so much like her. It was a secret I had buried deep in my heart. Ouyang Jing didn't notice me. She was scanning the shelves, looking for something. I reached out, holding a book in front of her. "Classmate, are you looking for this?" I asked softly. She startled, then looked at the book in my hand. It was a level 4 English study guide. "Yes, thank you so much," she said, her face lighting up. "How did you know I needed this?" She began to study me. She could see from my clothes that I wasn't wealthy, but she seemed struck by my energy. There was something in the way I looked at her that made her feel a strange, indescribable connection. Seeing her smile made me feel like the whole world had brightened. "I just had a feeling," I said with a genuine grin. "You're funny," she laughed. "Are you a fortune teller or something?" Before I could answer, she reached out her hand. "Hi, I'm Ouyang Jing, from the School of Management. Nice to meet you." I took her hand. "I'm Qin Feng, from the School of Foreign Languages." I reached out and gently took her hand. It had been 1,000 years, but the sensation hadn't changed at all. Her hand was soft and small, exactly as I remembered. "Jing," I thought to myself, "this time I will protect our love. I won't let anyone stand in our way." I found myself staring at her, lost in the memory of her face, until I noticed the faint flush of confusion in her eyes. I realized I was still holding her hand. I quickly let go, feeling a rare wave of embarrassment wash over me. "I'm so sorry," I said, trying to regain my composure. I just got lost in thought for a second. A soft pink hue crept across Ouyang Jing's cheeks. She didn't seem angry, just surprised. For some reason, she felt an incredible aura coming from me, a presence that felt strangely connected to her own soul. She couldn't tell if it was just an illusion, so she quickly changed the subject to break the tension. "So, you're in the School of Foreign Languages? What's your major?" she asked. "English," I replied honestly. Her eyes widened in genuine admiration. "Wow, that's impressive. I'm actually trying to get a head start on my level 4 exam for December. I've heard it's best to pass it during freshman year because it only gets harder later on." She wasn't wrong. For most students who aren't English majors, their proficiency peaks at high school graduation and then drops off a cliff by their junior or senior year. "If you need any help, I'm available," I offered with a smile. "Really? I'll definitely take you up on that," she agreed immediately. We exchanged contact information. Even after a millennium, I still knew her number by heart, but I went through the motions anyway. She didn't know that, of course. She just felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if we were old friends who had finally reunited. We chatted for a few more minutes until her phone buzzed. She checked the message and looked at me apologetically. "Oh, Qin Feng, I'm so sorry. My roommates are blowing up my phone. I have to go." "It's fine," I said, keeping my tone light. "Go ahead. We'll see each other again, won't we?" She smiled brightly. "Definitely. I'll be coming to you for English lessons next time." But she waved and disappeared into the library stacks. I watched her walk away, a satisfied smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I wasn't in a rush to force things. I didn't want to use any special cultivation methods or tricks to win her over. I wanted to start from zero and build something real, just like we did in our past life. That was the only way it would be true happiness. As I stepped out of the library, a sudden thought struck me. Someone still owed me $2 million. I thought of Mo Chin Chun, that stunningly beautiful woman I had met. In terms of raw looks, she was perhaps even a point or two ahead of the current Ouyang Jing, simply because Jing was still a student and had a certain youthful innocence. But even a beauty didn't have the right to cheat Qin Jiuchen out of his money. I narrowed my eyes. Humph. I decided to put it aside for the moment, but little did I know, Mo Chin Chun wasn't trying to scam me. She was facing a crisis at home. Back at the Mo family estate, things were chaotic. After Mo Chin Chun returned with the white jade fruit, the news spread through the clan like wildfire. When she announced she wanted to give the fruit to her grandfather, Mo Zhongting, to wake him from his coma, the family erupted in opposition. Her second uncle, Mo Jianya, was the first to speak up. "Qing Chen, you're usually sensible, but this is a matter of life and death. You pick up some random piece of fruit from who knows where and expect us to treat it like a miracle cure? If something goes wrong, can you take responsibility for the consequences?" Ever since the old man fell into a coma, Imo Chingchen's father, Imo Jianjun, had been away on military duty. This left Imo Jianya in actual control of the family, especially the finances. Because he held the purse strings, everyone in the family followed his lead. Even the third brother, Imo Jianhai, didn't dare to cross him. "Third uncle, what do you think?" Imo Qingchen asked, looking at Imo Jianhai. She knew he was weak-willed, but she held out a sliver of hope. Imo Jianhai glanced at his older brother, Imo Jianya, and saw the cold, warning glare in his eyes. He sighed and looked away from his niece. "Qingchen, your second uncle has a point. We don't even know if this fruit is real. And even if it is, who's to say those ancient records are accurate? No one has actually seen one of these things work in modern times." In the Imo family, the eldest son, Imo Jianjun, was a powerful general who rarely had time to return home. Imo Jianya, the second son, was a high-ranking official in the Ministry of Commerce and controlled all the family's businesses. Imo Jianhai, the third son, had always been a bit of a playboy. He knew he couldn't compete with his brothers, so he settled for running a single listed company worth a few billion. It was enough for him, and he knew if he crossed Imo Jianya, he'd lose that too. Just then, a fashionably dressed middle-aged woman walked into the room. It was Imo Qingchen's second aunt, a sharp-tongued woman who loved to meddle in family affairs for her own gain. "Qingchen, your uncles are right," she chimed in. "You're not a child anymore. You should be looking for a good husband to marry instead of running around playing doctor with these nonsensical things." "Aunt, we are talking about Grandpa's medicine. Don't change the subject," Imo Qingchen said, her voice cold as she suppressed her anger. The aunt raised her voice, her tone mocking. "Medicine? What medicine? Are we talking about some trash from a street-side swindler?" She knew exactly what they were discussing, but she was fishing for someone to back her up and humiliate Imo Qingchen further. Sure enough, as soon as the words left her mouth, another relative jumped in to join the attack. My second aunt didn't hold back. She looked at the white jade fruit I had brought for Grandpa and curled her lip in disgust. She claimed I had just picked up some random, broken piece of fruit from the street, and that even a back-alley quack's medicine would be better than this. Her words were pure poison. She was trying to make my efforts look worthless. Because her husband, Imo Jianya, controlled the family's finances, she felt she didn't need to show me any respect at all. Then my other aunt chimed in, her voice shrill and loud. She called me ignorant and asked if I was trying to kill the old man. She reminded everyone how much Grandpa had spoiled me growing up, calling me unfilial and suggesting I had dark motives before I was even married off. She even hinted that once I left the family, I'd probably stop admitting I was a MO altogether. It was a relentless verbal assault, attacking my character from every angle. Before I could even find the words to respond, my younger brother, Imo Qingchen, snapped. He couldn't take it anymore. He roared at them, accusing them of teaming up to bully his sister. He reminded them that I had put my studies on hold and walked away from the company I worked so hard to build, all for the sake of Grandpa's health. He asked them if they even deserved to be called elders after slandering the spiritual medicine I had finally managed to find. Qingchen was known as a stubborn, spoiled young master, but he had a deep respect for me. Our mother died shortly after he was born, and I was the one who raised him. In our house, I was the only person he listened to besides Grandpa. He didn't even listen to our father, Imo Jianjun, half the time. He absolutely would not stand by and watch me get bullied. My second aunt's temper flared at his outburst. She mocked him, calling him a rice worm and a useless playboy who had never contributed a single thing to the Imo family. She told him he was nothing without the family name. Harsh as it was, she wasn't entirely wrong. In the past, Qingchen had been the textbook definition of a rich, entitled brat who did everything except anything useful. Just as Qingchen was about to explode and hurl insults back at her, Imo Jianya cut him off. His voice was sharp and commanding. He told everyone to stop treating the family hall like a wet market. He declared that the matter of Grandpa's medicine would be put on hold until our eldest uncle returned to give his opinion. Then, he simply turned and walked away. Just like that, my plan to save Grandpa was blocked. I was consumed with anxiety for him, so much so that I completely forgot about the 2 million I owed Qin Feng. I didn't realize that Qin Feng wouldn't even think about that debt for another 2 weeks. Half a month passed before my father, Imo Jianjun, finally returned from his special mission. He walked into the house in his crisp military uniform, the single star on his shoulder marking him as a major general. He was in his 40s, tall and sharp-eyed. He had reached this rank through a mix of family influence and his own undeniable capability. As a career soldier, he was blunt and powerful. Even Imo Jianya, who ran the family business, stepped aside when he arrived. That was the real reason Jianya had wanted to wait for him. It wasn't out of respect, but out of fear. "Dad, you're finally back," I said, standing outside Grandpa's private clinic. I was relieved. I thought if I could just convince him, I could finally give Grandpa the medicine. Ever since my mother passed, my father had poured every ounce of his energy into the military. That was why he rose so fast, but it also meant we weren't close. We barely saw him once a year. He didn't greet me with a smile. Instead, he gave me a cold, dark look. He told me that if he hadn't come back, I'd still be messing around with unproven nonsense. He claimed he had already asked his best friends in the military medical corps to help, and even they were powerless. He warned me to stop being ridiculous. I knew someone had already gotten to him, poisoning his mind with their version of the story before I could even speak. He hadn't even asked me a single question before making his decision. I wanted to ignore him, but for Grandpa's sake, I tried to stay patient. I told him I knew exactly what I was doing. I pointed out that since Grandpa got sick, he had only brought one person to see him, and only once. How could he be so sure there was no hope? My father's hand flew up as if to slap me. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him with a tired, stubborn expression. Slowly, his hand dropped. I think he realized he didn't really have the right to lecture me. He hadn't raised us. Grandpa had. He had been a father in name only, choosing his career over his children. He owed us, and he knew it. He sighed deeply. He told me he would tolerate my willfulness one last time. But he made the stakes clear. As long as Grandpa was alive, even in a vegetative state, the Imo family would stand strong. If Grandpa died now, the family's glory would fade. "I'll let you use the medicine," he said. "But you have to reconsider your relationship with Chu Zhongqi." He was making a deal. Chu Zhongqi was the golden child of the Chu family in Yanjing, one of the four most powerful families in the entire country. They were on a level far above the Imo family. My father wanted a political marriage to solidify our position. He was a general, but his prestige couldn't match Grandpa's. If Grandpa passed away, he needed the Chu family to keep the Imo family from falling. He told me Chu Zhongqi was coming south specifically for me, and this time, I wasn't allowed to blow him off. My father needed outside help, and Chu Zhongqi was his perfect candidate. When I heard him say those words, I felt a wave of shock crash over me. It quickly turned into deep sadness, and finally, a cold sense of despair. I couldn't believe it. My own father was using the family crisis to threaten his own daughter. Was he even my father anymore? I wanted to scream, but I kept the pain locked inside. For Grandpa's sake, I had to endure it. After a long, heavy silence, I looked at him with hollow eyes and gave a small, weak nod. I said a single word of agreement and turned away. My back felt cold as I walked out, alone and broken. With my father's backing, no one else in the Imo family dared to object. Even my second aunt, who had been the loudest voice against me, suddenly went quiet. I finally had the chance. I carefully boiled the white jade fruit into a liquid and fed it to Grandpa. Then I waited. 1 day passed. 2 days. 3. There was no change at all. Grandpa just lay there like a living corpse. My second aunt saw this and didn't waste a second. She wore a mocking smirk and spoke in a sharp, sarcastic tone. She asked where the miracle medicine was, laughing that 3 days had gone by with no reaction. She even suggested I had just picked up a piece of rotten trash from a fruit market. My uncle, Imo Jianya, didn't say anything. He just gave a cold sneer and walked away. He knew he didn't need to use words anymore. The failure spoke for itself. One by one, the aunts and cousins left the room. My father stood by the door, his face a mask of disappointment. He told me to stay home and prepare to receive Chu Zhongqi when he arrived from Yanjing. Then he left too. The room became deathly silent, leaving only me and my younger brother, Imo Qinglin. "How is this possible?" I whispered. I collapsed by the bed, my mind spinning. Why didn't the spirit fruit work? I muttered the question over and over like a prayer that hadn't been answered. My brother knelt beside me, his face full of pity. He told me not to be so hard on myself and that I had done my best. Then he lowered his voice. He said he suspected the fruit wasn't a spirit jade fruit at all. He reminded me that the guy who sold it, Qin Feng, had called it a white jade fruit. He thought we had simply found the wrong thing. I looked up at him, my eyes suddenly clearing. My brother blinked, looking confused. He asked if he had said something wrong. Ching Chun, I said, my voice gaining strength. We still owe him 2 million. I completely forgot. It's been half a month. My brother's face darkened with anger. He couldn't believe I was worried about the money. He called the fruit a piece of junk and said it wasn't worth 5 million. He even argued that if we ever saw Qin Feng again, we should demand the first 3 million back. I gave him a sharp look. I told him to stop talking nonsense. I knew Qin Feng wasn't someone to be messed with. More importantly, he was the only one who recognized the fruit and knew its effects. That meant he understood spiritual medicine. Maybe, just maybe, he was the key. My eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. My brother told me I was being a fool. He was convinced Qin Feng was just a con artist. I didn't listen. I stood up immediately, ready to move. He grabbed my shoulders, trying to stop me, asking what I was planning to do. I'm going to find him, I said. My brother shook his head, calling Qin Feng a mere kid who couldn't possibly know anything. I looked at my brother calmly. I told him that regardless of everything else, I still owed the man 2 million. Since I didn't have the money to pay him back now, I had to face him in person. I had to try one last time.